I'm here today with Cal Jones. Cal Jones is a judo and grappling coach based in North Wales with 31 years of judo and 21 years of coaching experience. He has an MSc in advanced coaching practice and has a special interest in ecological dynamics and representative learning design. He's delivered coaching seminars all over the world to judo and BJJ coaches and works with coaches from a wide variety of sports in a consultancy role. Finally, although he may be very humble, many people call him one of judo's most qualified coaches in the UK. Cal, thanks for joining us.
Oh, not at all. Pleasure to be here.
So, let's start with the hard basics. Could you explain ecological dynamics for the newbies? What is it? Why is it important? How does it apply to judo?
Yeah, sure. So essentially, it's just a different theory of learning. It's underpinned by a couple of distinct theories that have merged together to form ecological dynamics. Principally, we have ecological psychology and dynamical systems theory are the two biggies that have sort of smashed together. The sort of central contention is mostly underpinned by a different view of how perception works. So in the sort of traditional view of how brains interpret information, we have the view of our brain working as this interpreter that enriches information. So when I see something, I'm not seeing something that exists. I'm seeing something as a representation of the thing that I see through loads of models and schema and mental models in my head that are sense-making. As an ecological psychology advocate, I think a lot of the time we're actually attuning to information in the landscape of affordances, in the things in front of us. We are actually picking up on information and moving in relation to it without our brain having to enrich that information. It is itself specifying. So what I mean by that, it's a lot of sciencey nonsense. What I mean by that is if I see a ball traveling towards me, I don't need to go into my brain for my brain to start interpreting vectors, velocities, angles, trajectories, and time to contact, all these sorts of things that I can predict where it's roughly going to be and catch it. I'm moving in relation to the rate of change of the size of the object. It's a simple thing. As it comes closer to me, I'm moving so that I can intercept it at the point that it is near me. It doesn't need my brain to enrich that information through any representations in my brain. I'm moving directly based on the information as it comes towards me. And in judo, loads of that information is haptic, which makes it really, really difficult to start doing proper studies on. So I can feel when the right time is to throw. You get a sense for when people are in and out of balance based on how they feel in your hands. It's a really, really strange skill to possess, that you can time a throw based on somebody's weight being slightly in their heels. But that pickup of sense data is something that we can start scaffolding in through practice design. So we don't need our brain to have representations of, this is when they're on their heels. I can just feel it in my hands. Yeah, that'd be it. And then I suppose the dynamical system side of things is looking at the complexity of how we organize our actions. So there's a famous problem called the degrees of freedom problem. Try saying that fast. That Nikolai Bernstein brought forward, that essentially looked at all of the multitude of ways we can move our body to accomplish a task. So originally they were looking at people hammering a nail, and the more masterful they were, the more expert they were in hammering nails, the more variation and variability they had in how they delivered a nail. If you're a complete scrub like me, you're holding the nail and you're tippy-tapping it with this really, really frozen degree of freedom. I'm just doing this. If you're a roofer that's been hammering nails for 30 years, you're probably ping, just any old way you can organize, because the only important bits about that thing, the bits that are invariant, are the contact point. My hammer has to hit the nail for it to go in. That's probably about it, right? All of the variance between that moment can look like a bunch of different things. So dynamical systems theory attends to that side of things, how we can solve a problem in a multitude of different ways. So the idea of an idealized perfect technique is a little bit nonsensical. With a large caveat that physics exists. So certain things have to be done in certain ways purely because the size of an object you're trying to move requires it. If I'm trying to pick up a sheet of paper from the floor, I can bend any way I want and pick it up. The forces at play aren't adequate to cause me any kind of trouble. If I was picking up, I was going to make up a really high number that I wouldn't be able to lift. We'll do it anyway. If I'm going to lift 300 kilograms, I probably have to put myself in a position that I can actually produce maximal force. So definitely, the more extreme we get in terms of the physical outputs that are necessary to achieve a task, the more similar things will start to look on different people. So there is a big caveat.
Awesome. So much we can just go into depth on any of those things, and yet I'm gonna move on here. So great explanations, by the way. This, for the people that don't know, this is tough. This is very tough. We are doing our best. So tell me about how you were first exposed to ecological dynamics. What was that like, and what made you make that transition?
Yeah, so I suppose I'd been coaching through a teaching games for understanding framework for, well, the entire time I've been coaching. I was fortunate that my coach was accidentally really ecological in how he delivered his sessions. He wouldn't have known that he was underpinned by masses and masses of literature. He was just doing stuff that was kind of games based, but a lot of the games that he was utilizing were actually helping us learn to pick up information. So I'd always recognized that that type of training can really get you good without having to go through rote repetition. When I'd visit other clubs, and it was just lots of uchikomi for the judo boys in the house, just rote turning in halfway for a throw, pretending you're about to, and then coming out, and then going in, and then out. Loads of that, and then some just throwing against partners that stood still. And it was crushingly tedious for me. I didn't really enjoy it at all. You were just there waiting for the randori where you could actually fight at the end. But I recognised when we turned up to competitions, and my club, the club I was a member of, that is now the club I coach, used to do really well. We'd put plenty of medalists out, and we were doing something completely different. So the efficacy of it as an approach was ingrained from 5, when I was very, very young. But probably when I was on my undergrad, so when I was 19, maybe, I was doing some stuff on motor learning, and I stumbled across, I think it must have been Sean Mishka's stuff, discussing Schmidt's work. So I'd gone down a Schmidt rabbit hole and had started looking at motor programs, but we were looking at parameterizing existing motor programs so that they could be meshed to meet the demands of novel issues. So we've got a problem emerges, but we have these schema in our brain that we can then press play on. And it seemed like an appealing answer to me, because I recognized that the version of a throw we do when we're doing our Nakikomi, or just throwing a partner like this, looks nothing at all like the throw when I'm doing it against somebody that's trying to stop me. So as an explanation, I thought, this is useful. It was only in delving down that rabbit hole that I came across ecological dynamics and Keith Davids' work, and you're kind of thinking, this seems a little bit more parsimonious to me. It makes more sense. And obviously we have the overwhelming problem, as far as I can see it, that the human reaction time is slower than most of the decisions that are made in sport. So if I'm relying on my brain to process signal, for it to go to my brain from my eyes, for stuff to then get processed, to then coordinate an action, nobody would ever hit a fastball in baseball, right? It just would be an impossible task. So this is one of the things that explained that in a way that I was quite content with. And then my master's I did in Sheffield, Hallam. So that's pretty much the home of ecological dynamics. That's where Keith Davids is based. And yeah, so a lot of my lecturers were advocates of it. So they weren't evangelical, but obviously when you're in that place, you'd have to be pretty obtuse to not pick up on the fact that there's some other thing going on in the world other than the brain as a robot. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, I've heard he's got like one of the best PhD programs actually. So I was actually
Well,
looking at those and
hopefully we'll find out.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so I want to throw you the huge question. Okay, and again, we have all the time to dig into this. So let's say I don't know how good Canada's judo team is. Let's say Canada, some random country, they come to you. They say, "Cal, we've been reading a little bit about this ecological dynamics stuff, and we want to totally redesign our judo team. Here's $100 million. Like, redesign this whole program from scratch however you want. What are you doing A to Z?"
Well, waste, fraud, and abuse would probably be the first thing. How much of that can go directly in my pocket? I think essentially we'd probably do something where we attend to the basic necessity of perception action coupling. So the practice tasks that we design and deliver across a session, the majority of that time should be spent where there is information coming from your opponent that you can start learning to do something with. So rather than doing rote repetition of a throw to groove a move or build muscle memory or whatever nonsensical reason people put forward, I'm not repeating a solution. I'm repeating the process of finding a solution. Mm-hmm. So very early on, this is nice to have a little bit of power. I'm enjoying this. Very early on, I'd probably look to try and get masses and masses of cross-sport exposure. So I'd want them doing bits of wrestling, maybe some Greco-Roman, and then parkour, masses and masses of effectivity building stuff. All the movement control stuff is super, super valuable. It's a bit of a segue, but I'm going to put it out there. I've been desperate to have a ballet dancer come to me for so long. I reckon within a very short amount of time, I could get them very competent at judo. The level of control those freaks have is just obscene. So yeah, have them press play and make me look very good with very little effort. And obviously stuff like rugby, stuff where you're developing a bunch of different effectivities, ways of moving your body in different ways, so you can solve problems in completely novel different ways. I think the transfer from that is from an early age is really, really valuable. For their actual practice tasks, it would be a whole bunch of carrots in the mashed potato. So we'd be doing, I don't know, Knights and Horses, a game I play with the kids and sometimes with the adults if they've been good. So you just essentially end up having a small kid go with a big kid. The small kid sits on the big kid's back and the big kid's on all fours. And you just have to pull all the other people off so you're the last horse standing or you have more points than the other horses. So what you're essentially teaching them is how to use your hooks to control their back. They're learning back control, but playing this little Knights and Horses game. The transfer from that has been ridiculously good. When I've had kids go up from the middle class to my senior class, their capacity to hold grown adults with hooks from the back because they've played Knights and Horses, or I'm going to just presume that is why, is through the sky, right? So there'll be a whole bunch of practice tasks like that where we're looking at the precursors, the things that make them effective in positions, and have them do a whole bunch of that, attending to those problems. Then I guess we'd probably look to get all the people that are interested in pursuing an elite program in the same sorts of places. So one of the problems we have here in North Wales, I'm 4.5 hours from our capital city in Wales. So when I was young and had medalled in the Welsh closed, that got you a ticket onto the national team, but I wouldn't be able to travel 4.5 hours to Cardiff twice a week on weekdays and then on the weekends. So becoming elite in judo was never really on the cards. You know, I'm now middling competent, but even at my best, I was okay. So I think getting people that are equally skilled in a position that they can train with each other is super, super valuable. So essentially what it means is you get more repetitions solving problems that are being posed by a better player. It's, no amount of me fighting a 5-year-old child will get me to an Olympic level. But if you put an Olympic caliber athlete on the mat with me, after 10 years, I'll be a pretty good player, regardless of my starting point. The problems they're posing are such that I'll start picking up on that. I suppose that would be the main thrust of it, would be ensuring that consistently across the majority of all practice tasks, people are answering problems. They are solving problems rather than repeating moves. And I could do that for way less than 100 million. Just think how much of that I could siphon off.
I am hoping there's some people listening now or in the future that are on some committees. There's a good chance.
Yeah, it was frustrating. I'd put forward my name to try and get onto the board of directors for Welsh Judo a few years ago. Must have been at the end of COVID. I had time, and it essentially said, we're a really small nation within a pretty small nation. So Wales is part of the United Kingdom. We're the most important part, in my opinion. But our population's like 3 million. It's not a large place at all. And of those 3 million, those that do judo is just a tiny fraction. So for us to be able to compete in any meaningful way and get more Welsh people on the British squad than is currently the case, I thought we're in a perfect position that we could just do something radically different. We could actually look at introducing these sorts of pedagogies from the ground up. And I wasn't right. I wasn't picked. I'm over it. But I really thought that it was the perfect place to do it, because it is such a small nation. To punch above your weight, it would be such a good indication of the efficacy of the methodologies. It would have been, I think it'd have been worth the risk. But as it stands, we've gone from 40 clubs in North Wales to 3. So I don't think that judo will be lasting that much longer in Wales, in all honesty. That's why I do so much grappling and BJJ adjacent stuff. Well, I suppose it is just BJJ. I can call it that now. Now I have my grades. Yeah. A shame. Picked the wrong sport when I was 5.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's still hope. Certainly, again, my optimism is, science is a slow process, but over time, I really trust that the process moves in positive directions. That, we may not be thinking the right things, the most efficient things right now, but when you elongate the time scale 10 years down the road, 20, 50 years, we start approaching better things, more accurate things. And to me, it really seems like ecological dynamics is that thing. And so, yeah, it's tough when the things right now we're fighting to get this in there. And there are places that are integrating it and have been doing so for a long period of time, even already. But yeah, it's when we're in the fight, it's God, this is better. Why can't you,
I know. It's so frustrating, especially when you look at the approach is just ingrained across so many high-level sports, like Liverpool's goalkeeping coach, the whole of the talent development stuff in AIK. There's loads and loads of football clubs where, let's not tiptoe around it, where it probably matters most, financially. What we fiddle about with in judo isn't going to cost someone £100 million. But if Liverpool's goalkeeper makes a glaring error, and I say this as a United fan, it would cost them lots and lots of money. They are a big team. Ugh, hurts. That are competing for the highest honours in the most popular sport on earth. It really does matter at this point. And if they're in a position that they go, oh, actually, this guy's getting really good results, and this is the pedagogy he's using, it will bleed in more. It has already become a big thing, but the bleed down it's inevitable. You can see it in BJJ. There's an absolute thirst for it. You do find that there's resistance, but I think the resistance it's an understandable thing because people are invested in what they do. You have been coaching a certain way, and somebody coming along and saying, here's another way of doing it that might be better, doesn't come across as anything other than what you've been doing isn't good. It's just the way that it reads. It's very difficult not to interpret it that way. And if you're a coach that deserves the title, you'd be hurt by that. I'm loathful of 10 years ago me that wasn't doing stuff as well as hopefully as well as today me is doing. There are kids that I'd coached then that I think, I could have done better for you at that point. I could have designed a better practice task to overcome this hurdle or whatever the problem is. And that's me being annoyed at me. That's not somebody else coming along and saying, yeah, what you're doing, shit, maybe don't do that. It's it is a difficult thing to to manage. Polite criticism.
100%. And I think about this, like, I had someone comment on one of my videos, and he was saying something about, man, like, I did so many reps of all of these things, and now, like he was kind of like, it seemed like he was kind of accepting the science stuff, but he was like, man, like, you're telling me I wasted all those, and that's tough, for sure. That's super hard for an athlete, for a coach. Like, we're all invested in this stuff. And my thing was like, I'm like, dude, look, like, I've drilled a hell of a lot too in so many different disciplines, probably far more than this guy. And we're not saying that you get nothing whatsoever out of it, right? You already got some stuff. There is some stuff. That's in the past. But I think there's this orientation now towards, like, you're going to keep training. And now with this method, you can get more out of what you're putting in. And for me, that's really exciting.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It doesn't affect anything that's happened in the past. Like, we can say whatever we want of that training was great or that training sucked, but, like, that doesn't actually change the progress I got out of that already in the past, right? What we're doing now is we're changing what can happen in the future.
Yeah, it's a really healthy outlook. Like, it'd be glorious if that was how everybody viewed it. Like, it would just make things so much easier, right? But no, I fully agree. I'm hoping that in 10 years I'll look back at the coaching I'm doing now and think that's rubbish. Like, we as a field have moved so much further forward, and I as a person have become more aware of other things that you look back and go, I wish I could have done better. Like, I think the trick is to do 10 years of coaching, not 10 years of doing 1 year's worth of coaching over and over and over again, right? I think when people are afraid to look at the pedagogies they're using or the approaches they're using or the decisions they've made, and they just go and put the armor up and go, no, I've done my best, please don't hurt me. It's very difficult to coach 10 different years. You're just doing the same thing ad nauseum. And I think that's definitely something to avoid if we can. It's a big change.
100%. And I think we all put that armor up somewhere around some sort of foundational assumptions, right? Like, there's some sort of, like, for instance, like, I haven't questioned really gravity at all. Like, you probably haven't either, like, we're working on other stuff, and someone else can work on that, right? Einstein can come along and say, hey, there's some exceptions to this. And someone else can say, hey, there's some exceptions to that, right? But I think as coaches, we put the armor on somewhere around some level of foundational assumptions, whether it be like some very core things of like gravity and like physics, Newtonian mechanics, or this is how I coach. We need deliberate practice because we need to run these neural pathways because we need to myelinate them. And I'm changing just how I'm doing that with, like, what drills do I use, to, like, I'm not changing the drills I'm using. There's, like, you can put the armor all the way on.
Yeah, for sure.
And everyone's at some level on the spectrum of that. And again, I think we both understand that this is hard. This is hard.
Absolutely. Especially if you care, I think there's a lot of coaches that don't. But if you're interested enough to be reading books about it, you care. And it hurts. It does hurt when you read what you've done is not the perfect. But we do have, the don't make the perfect the enemy of the good. It was good at the time. We've done our best. Move on.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you're saying, like the more you care about it, the more it hurts when you're like, oh, that was bad, right? And so that again leads some of the most successful coaches, I think, especially if they've had success in the past doing things this way, and they care about it so much that those can be often the hardest people to like question the beliefs that got them championships for themselves and for their athletes. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and just as a quick aside, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Brene Brown's work. You talked about
Mm.
putting the armor on, but just for some listeners there, like she's got some really amazing work on vulnerability, and she uses that kind of phrase of like putting the armor on and taking it off. And she talks about how really good leaders and just like high performers in general, like one of the ways that we can actually be strong is by taking the armor off, actually, and exposing ourselves to like real criticism and taking it seriously rather than like, you just don't know what you're fucking talking about, right? Like, screw you
Yeah.
and screw them, I'm me. Yeah. Right? That's like
Absolutely.
armor
Yeah.
on versus, armor off is not saying like I'm the worst, but it's just being open to like, here's where I'm at, and this could be wrong. I could be wrong. I could not, but I'm open to really listening and contending with the criticism so that if there are things that I can use to get better and improve as a coach, as a person, whatever, you can incorporate and bring those things in, right? And have that growth mindset. Um, so if you haven't read, or anyone in the audience that hasn't read any of Brene Brown's work, she's amazing. So highly recommend.
Brene.
Brene Brown. Yes.
Cool. I'll have a look.
She has a very short like TED talk, like 20 minutes. That's
Perfect.
super nice. I love that one. I think it's
More than
called
that, I'm gone.
the
I can do
power of
20 minutes.
vulnerability. She's got a book by the same name that I also love, and then she's got all sorts of other books, so you can go deep down the rabbit hole.
Awesome.
And so you were talking earlier about perception action coupling and making sure what we're doing in practice looks like the competition, right? And we have a term for this, which is representative learning design. And this is what you've done your master's thesis on, as I understand. Can you tell us more about that?
Oh, excuse me. Yeah. So, it's essentially, as you've said, we're in a position that if we can make practice tasks have it's not look like competition. We have this. There's an issue at the heart of representative learning design that 100% representative practice would just be the competition. And if all I did all the time was just the competition, I'd probably get okay, but I wouldn't be able to get as good as quickly. So what we're trying to do is take slices of the game and pack in as many opportunities of solving a problem that slice holds as is possible, whilst keeping the information in that slice representative of the game, if that makes sense. So as an example, if what did we do on the weekend? So if we're playing a game for something like a Tayatoshi or an Uchimata, so a throw where you're turning your back and you're using your leg to either block their legs or reap their leg. So the important part of that essentially is that I can turn my back to my opponent without them being able to counter me, and I can get some form of contact with their far side leg or their near side leg. If it's a far side leg and my foot is on the floor and I use my hands to push them over, it's called a Tayatoshi. If I whip my leg back and they rotate over, it has different names depending on where it is, but we'll say for argument's sake it's an Uchimata. So we played a game that I call turny backy blocky, because I'm a child, where all you have to do is turn your back and block their leg and push them over you. So how I go about doing that, I don't care at all. So for the scoring system, we said you get a single point if I can use my calf, the back of my leg, to touch your shin, the front of your leg, or thigh, the front of your leg. So it doesn't matter how I've gone about doing it. It doesn't matter if I'm out of posture, if my alignment is appalling. We're just looking to get to a position that I can rotate my back and get my leg across into a position that is useful a bunch of times. The problem with that is the behaviors that we start to develop if we're prolonged in that position start to break down. They don't have action fidelity, because I'd end up in a position that I might just machine gun my leg out in a position that would never throw somebody, and I haven't compromised their weight at all. I'm just chucking a leg across. So very quickly, we move on to the same game, but a bit different, which is turning, backy, blocky, +1. So, I'm a simple man. So all we're doing is the same thing, but now if I can make my partner fall onto the floor after I've done it, I get 5 points. Super simple. You can add in, if you pick your partner up when they have turned in to try and throw you, score a point as well. So then it essentially means that I have to start attempting to break a balance and destroying their base of support. If I turn in a position that you could just lift me up, I've probably not got a very good throw. I'm probably going to have flying lessons very quickly and a very rude introduction to the floor. So given the person who is receiving the throw an option to lift your opponent off the floor, we both know that you are in trouble at this point, right? So after these sorts of rule sets are brought in, we end up with people that start to figure out really efficient ways of getting into positions to do throws where you're using the back of your leg to block your partner's leg and rotate them over it, and use the back of your leg to lift your partner and get them to the floor. It's a really simple slice of the game. The amount of opportunities they get to solve that problem, turning your back and using the back of your leg to rotate your opponent over, is exponentially higher than if we'd done the exact same amount of time in just free sparring. Just go fight each other. So we're really, really saturating the number of repetitions they get and constraining the task such that it is focused on a specific area, right? Then, next stage, the issue we have then, again, becomes that both players are aware that the only way that they can be scored against is with this one thing. So the way that they would defend against it becomes really compromised. I'd end up just hinging back miles away from you so that you can't get any lift. So that's when free practice with rules comes in. So I am a huge advocate of using point systems to gently nudge or maybe even aggressively cajole people into exploring different options. So we'd go into open practice, but I would say any throw you do on your opponent is worth a point. If you can use the back of your leg to block their leg, it is as good as a throw. You score a point just for trying. If you use that action and get them to the floor, it is then worth 5 points. So now, if I'm trying to do the move on you, and your defense puts you in a position that I just foot sweep you, I just foot sweep you. I just pick up my point. It's fine. It's not an issue at all. But by putting importance, by shining the spotlight on these turny backy blocky throws, it lets them explore that area. So we're starting to contextualize the skill that they have, the thing we have been looking at, within the greater whole of the game. So even when we're doing free practice with rules in, with those sort of rule constraints, we're starting to shape their exploration space such that they are attempting the thing in a more true-to-life version of the game, right? I think that's the value of representative learn design, is all the way through those things, we're sliding up or down the scale of representativeness, but we're constantly making sure that there is information that they are attuning to. It's not just me turning in and doing the move 1,000 times. I'm always picking up on information and coordinating my action based on it. There's a little adage, I can't remember who I stole it off, and I'm going to claim it as my own. I've got a thing I made up that's brilliant, which is reduce without impoverishing. So we want to reduce the complexity of the practice task without impoverishing the quality of the information that we're learning to attune to. If we can live by that little adage, I think that the quality of practice tasks we design will just shoot through the roof. It really will. Yeah, I think that's the big thing.
Awesome. I think Rob Gray has another thing I want to add, just to add on to that I like. He talks about this idea of like scaling versus cropping an image. He gives this analogy. So like the idea is, okay, if competition or full sparring is the whole image, and then cropping is just working on a section of it, right? Like let's say you only win if you get these turny backy blocky throws, right? That's a smaller section of that. And if we just do that, and that's the only way you can win, we're ignoring other parts of the picture. right? And so that's a little bit like cropping the image versus scaling the image down and trying to still have everything in it, but we're focusing on certain parts. So like the example you gave of the last game, turny backy blocky throws +2, where everything is there, right? Is a good example of like scaling the image. Everything,
Yeah,
all
yeah,
the
yeah.
information that could be important for a judo player is still present in that game. And you're probably trying to use the point system to bias people towards incorporating these new affordances so they can build these new structures, right? These new attractors in areas that we want and information that we think is important.
Exactly that, yeah.
Cool. And then, so while we're on the subject of turny backy blocky throws, I have a good feeling that there's a reason why you're saying that, even though it's a silly name, and not Uchimata or Taitoshi. Could you expand on that more?
Yeah. One is I'm not a fan of tradition and stuff like that, just in general. I do judo because I like pajama wrestling, not because, you know, I say I'm not a Japanophile, but I have a cherry blossom in my garden, and I like Japan, but I don't do judo to pretend to be Japanese. And no criticism at all to the people that enjoy that, find value in kata and the wearing zori and only white gis and calling their teacher sensei. Like, I collect Magic the Gathering cards, I play Warhammer. I am in no position to judge anybody's hobbies at all. But that's not why I do judo. So I don't really like to use all the Japanese terminology, just as a little bit of slight rebellion against the expectation of judo. But half of it is that. The other half, which is the more important part, is there are families of throws that are all linked together by the same sort of action. So something like a koshiwaza, sort of hip techniques. The skill set, the thing that I need to be able to be good at is turning my back to my partner and lifting them. So turny backy, lifty throws, if you will. There are loads and loads and loads of different versions of it. So for those of you that know judo words, we have like ogoshi, koshiguruma, we have tsurugomagoshi, we have tsurugoshi, we have moroi seanagi, we have ippon seanagi, we have a whole bunch of throws where all I'm trying to do is turn my back to my partner and lift them off the floor and then throw them on the ground. How I'm attached to them changes the name of the throw, but ultimately I'm super gluing them to me after I've level changed, and then I level change, but back up, and then boop, plonk them on the floor. So for all of that family of throws, the sort of important bit is the same. It's just turning your back and lifting them skill set that we're trying to develop. So I don't care if you like to do an ogoshi, and Jim likes to do an ippon seanagi, and Terry likes to do a koshiguruma. Like, we all have completely different likes and dislikes of throws, and we all have completely different body types. If I was 5'5", I would probably do different judo to someone who is 6'9". It just literally physics exists. So the skill set remains the same regardless. Both people will do attacks where they turn their back and lift their partner off the floor, but how they choose to connect to their partner will change. So while we're developing the skill is the turning your back and lifting. It's not doing an ippon seanagi, right? So that's the main reason, even if I like to think it's because I'm an iconoclast.
I want to push you to expand even more, because there's more that we both know that that hasn't been said yet, right? As far as self-organization, right? As far as variations of the technique. And so what I think you're saying is, what I think is also a reason for this sort of pedagogy, is that there, even within something that we would call any of these throws, right? Say an Uchimata, there's a lot of variation as far as the exact details of how you're doing it. And one of the core tenets of ecological dynamics is kind of that we don't really care about those right? What we want is the function of the move, not the move, right? That's what you're saying of the skill. Like the skill is getting them on the floor, not how precisely we do the movement that gets them on the floor, right? And so again, like just with the turny backy blocky throws, there's a whole, the way I see it is like there's a whole wider spectrum of all these different movements where you're going to turn your back, you're going to block some sort of leg, some sort of base of support, and you're going to use that function to throw them and put your partner on the floor. And the exact details of how you do that, one, we think is not controlled by the brain, at least not in a puppeteering way. And two, they're like task specific. It's individual specific, dynamic specific, and it's what we're saying is like it's not coming down from the brain and then like there's the Uchikomi pattern. Now here's the muscles, performing that pattern and with slight, but they can change things a little. No, it's like actually this is just a pattern that these two interacting bodies on this mat have made in this day, while this person is trying to throw that person, and that person is trying to not get thrown and then throw the other, right?
Yeah, it's exactly that, right? So we have distinctions between techniques because long ago somebody decided that they were going to codify the things that exist as moves, and they gave them names. So you're 100% right. I don't care if you're doing an Ipponsi Nagi or an Ogoshi, but I also don't care how you choose to do each of those moves. It's not this discrete thing with an idealized model that exists, right? I can't film one version and draw lots of lines on it and go, oh, this is the one. Perfect. Look at where his center of mass is. Oof. Like, I've made that mistake. It's definitely not how we should be approaching these things. So a great example would be something like an Uchimata. So there are so many different ways you could do an Uchimata. Like, there isn't one codified version of it. And the interesting thing is they look so different from each other. I think it's the throw that is the most obvious to spot, because we have versions of Uchimata where it is contingent on me having my standing leg between your feet so that my center of mass is underneath yours, and I'm essentially lifting you with one leg, so you get lifted into the air, and then I reach my leg back and use my arms to rotate you onto your back. So that is an Uchimata, but the throw is a turny backy lifty throw. Right? I have turned my back to you and I have lifted you with one foot. If I do the exact same thing, but instead of having my standing foot between your feet and under your center of mass, I am off center. So my standing foot is outside the line of your feet, and I smash your leg with my leg, and I just rely on upper body strength. I'm just roided to the gills, and I can overpower you. They're not on roids in judo, honest. If I could just overpower you with upper body strength, if somebody were watching that, they would classify it as an Uchimata. It fulfills the criteria for it to be Uchimata. It is not a turny backy lifty throw, it's a turny backy blocky throw. It is contingent on this hand action and me blocking the line of their legs to create rotation rather than elevation. So for me, I don't really care how you do the thing. If they land on their back and the referee does this, yay, we're good. It doesn't mean that all versions of all techniques are equally valid. Some things just mechanically you can't produce lift, or there's too many things that somebody could do to counter throw you if you do these things. So we can sort of gently nudge people towards search spaces. Making that decision is incredibly difficult for a coach. I think that's a really important thing to be aware of. So I'll use an example. I've used it multiple times. My koshi gurume. So the way I do my hip throw, I have an arm over their shoulder and I essentially bring my hips in from a mile away. I don't rely on a bend of knee to create lift. I just stick my butt on them and I hinge. So mechanically, it is a really inefficient throw. Like, it's, I suppose, more of a good morning exercise than a deadlift, right? Mechanically, it is not a good throw. It's not pretty. But it works for me. I'm able to do it from quite a long range. I can do it in combination with other things that I use as threat, so I can get a big reaction from them, compromise their base, and get myself in and just squish in and flop them over. If I, as a coach, was coaching me doing that, and I went, oh no, that's mechanically awful. It's really easy for them to block it just by pushing the hips forward, and I don't attend to the fact that there's levels of disguise, there's levels of pace, speed, range, all these things play into it. It's not just, I don't like that version of the move, which is a massive pitfall we can fall into if we start trying to nudge people away from solutions. So yeah, it's a tool to be used very, very cautiously and probably very infrequently. It's only if something's really dangerous or is consistently resulting in poor outcomes for a player. You know, they've tried it 1,000 different times against 1,000 different players and they're getting no success at all. At that point, you might come along and go, Danny, don't do that. Danny's my sister.
Or to that point, we also might design theoretically what I might think that you would say, which you can totally correct, is that we could design a game that's totally going to exploit what Danny's doing, and make and design the environment to push Danny out of that attractor. Right? We don't have
Absolutely.
to explicitly tell Danny, don't do that weird thing with your hips. Right? Like the environment is our power teacher, kind of, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I was having this discussion on Wednesday. There was a person who I was consulting for that was saying one of his players has a habit of just keeping grip. So they'll just stay held on regardless. So no matter what has happened, they might have been thrown on their back. Somebody might be trying to pass guard and all they're doing is this, holding on. So I was discussing how we can start to try and perturb that as a solution for them. So one of the games that we do is a game called Quick Grip, where you can only hold on for 5 seconds. So after 5 seconds, I just have to change my grip. Doesn't matter where I place my hands. I just can't keep my hands in the same space. So all we're doing is just creating perturbations on an existing stable attractor for him to nudge him out of that solution space. He has to figure some other thing out, right? I think that kind of approach to moving people away from a non-ideal, how would we say it? A poor solution space, something that they're using that isn't efficacious. There's a word. That is the ideal. If we can do that and create a design a practice task that does gently wrap them on the knuckles for doing the thing that might not be ideal, then they can start to coordinate a structure that accounts for that perturbation. It's the ideal, and it's the one that takes a bit longer. If you can have that conversation and say, have you noticed that you're like just holding on all the time, regardless of what happens? Have you tried doing other things? If you can use that as just a really quick interjection and they are able to go, oh yeah, I hadn't even thought of that. Maybe I'll do something else. That, from the coaching side of things, is perfect. You've changed their search space. They've got a completely different criteria they're looking to try and achieve. Unfortunately, when an attractor is really, really deep, pointing it out to them does nothing. You might tell me that I'm constantly doing this with my headphones. It's true, but I'm going to keep doing it. I don't want it on both ears in case my children come down. I want to hear them before they come through. Yeah, it's a stable attractor. I'm going to keep doing it, even though I'm aware of it. The conditions are such that I will keep doing it.
Yeah. It reminds me of I was teaching Olympic weightlifting many years ago to my movement students. And one of the big problems kind of the biggest problem in Olympic weightlifting is this looping of the bar traveling far away from you. And that's biomechanically inefficient. So how do we keep the bar close to us as we produce maximum power? And for beginners, this is a very challenging thing, right? They want to curl the bar and we have to how do we convince them and how do we get them to kind of jump and pull this bar more vertically? And I remember one day I was getting, one could say my patience was wearing down a little. People were really having trouble with this. It's a hard problem, right? We naturally gravitate towards picking up things with our arms. And so when we get people, that haven't really done a lot of picking up really heavy things before, especially trying to do it explosively very quickly, it's hard to break that attractor. And so one day what I did, I was like, all right, stop what you're doing. We're gonna do some curls. And we just did like curls to failure, like absolute. I just trashed their biceps, making, manipulating the individual constraint,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Creating fatigue. You can still try that thing, but I'm gonna make it really biomechanically inefficient for you to try to do that movement solution to try to push you towards a more effective, more like global minima, right? And of course, it didn't work perfectly as I would like, but it was
Yeah.
quite effective.
Yeah.
Certainly
No,
compared to just telling them
oh,
stop letting the bar go, right?
oh, for sure. Yeah, yeah. No, if we can constrain a practice class so that they are physically nudged into a space, that is the ideal. That's where the fun of coaching is as well. Sitting there and thinking I'm going to absolutely blast these people's biceps so that they can't do this. It's genius. It's a really great solution. Yeah, I like that. Yeah,
My
and sorry. Yeah, I'm not surprised that it worked. Like it obviously would have some effect in that this now. Oh no, I'll do this instead. I can't do that. Yeah, it's a great solution.
That's where my brain went as well for the student that's gripping more. I'm like, let him grip and like let's trash
Yeah.
those forearms and then see how much you want to grip. But I want to challenge you and see how far you take that idea of not caring about what movement solution people use. So I think especially for like lower level athletes, that's like super clear, right? Like, who cares? Like, perform the function. But where for me it might get a little more interesting, and I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on this, is like say you have a really high level judo player, and you're like, you're watching them for a long time, right? They're doing the training, and you're like, man, this guy never does a seoinage, like never. And for people that don't know anything about judo, like that's a pretty common throw, right? It's a pretty powerful throw. Would you say they're still doing, and it's also within the category of turny backy blocky throws, say they're still doing some of that functional category of turny backy blocky throws, would you say at the elite level for that athlete, would you say, man, let's teach you some seoinages just because you're never trying it? Or would you be like, hey, yeah, the function's there, we don't need it, you're good?
Yeah, I'd probably go the opposite way, in all honesty. It'd be if they are more novice and they haven't explored seoinage as an option. So when we're doing a turnibaki lifty part, then I'd think at this point you've attempted 4 different versions of this, but you're relatively new to the sport. You've not got really stable versions of these things yet. At that point, I might say, here's one that you might favor. You're quite sure you've got the proportions that this might be something you like. This is it. This is what it looks like. Do 2 or 3. Try and do it in the game. I'd absolutely introduce it as an option, as something that is available to them early on. By the point that they're elite and a national, international player, I couldn't care less at that point. It's very much if they have a solution for that problem, they're able to turn their back and throw their partner. I don't care how you do it. There's a guy that used to train near us who was a Masters world champion. Really good player in the sort of Masters circuit. I think he's still competing on the Masters circuit. So he must be knocking on now. But he did 1 throw. He did a drop seoinage. That was it. You knew what he was going to try and do. Everybody knew what he was going to try and do. They used to call him the pear tree kid. His dad used to have him in the garden, turning against the tyre inner tube, doing drop seoinages in the garden. He had a very, very nice drop seoinage. He was competent at it. And he competes nationally with 1 throw. Like, he might try the odd thing. Doesn't really score with much else. he has a solution that is adequate to the problems in front of him. When he's in front of you and he turns and blocks you and lifts you, it doesn't matter what he's chosen to do it with. It just so happens that that is the thing he uses. I suspect that we get to a point that the more expert we get, the more we specialize with certain things. We have solutions that are more attractive to us. So, like my favorite judo player, Kozo Inui, is an Uchimata specialist, or was. He's retired now. Unbelievably good judo player, like Olympic champion, one of the best to ever do it. And people used to know he's going to Uchimata you. It's just going to happen at some point. He ended up developing a solution for when they deny him grip. So if I'm fighting you and I'm going to try and get hold of your sleeve so that I can rotate you onto your back, the second they don't give him his sleeve, he had a thing that solved that problem. So he'd do a pocket, so he'd grab like hold of both lapels or their armpit grips and would turn in and do a Seonagi version on them. So he'd do this, he'd do like a leg reapy things to take them the other direction based on where their weight is, if they didn't let him have the sleeve. If they'd let him have the sleeve, is what you matter. So you can like draw diagrams of the things that they tend to do, their tendencies, and they will be the things they score most highly with, because they are the things they've explored in the most depth. From my perspective, I'd much prefer it if they had more options for those things, so that they become less predictable. But there's definitely a point at which you're so good at the thing, it doesn't matter if people know it's coming. If I tell you I'm going to punch you in the head, I'm not the greatest puncher on earth. You'd probably be able to block it. If insert good boxer says it, they're probably going to land, right? It's, yeah. So I think we do specialize. The more elite we get, I'd introduce the option lower down. So it might be something they take forward with them. It's a very long-winded answer. I'm sorry.
No, that was great and very interesting. Yeah, I see your point. Just while we're on that subject, say you get the Uchimata specialist. Say he's already the gold medalist. How are you going to design tasks for him?
Therein lies the challenge. You're at a point that you have somebody who has, they've conquered all the lands before them. They're in Alexander the Great territory. I think essentially at that point, when you have people who are elite, so not even the best on earth, but they are competing at an international level, you're more tailoring what you do to the people they will be fighting. So they have an established skill set. They are well attuned to the performance environment. They can pick up on affordances. They can coordinate stable structures. They've got all of the tools available to them. At that point, it's the people you will be fighting. I know the likelihood of you facing this left-hander that likes to have a high overhand grip is very high. You fought him in the last 2 tournaments you've been in the medal categories, and you've lost to him each time. The problem isn't your judo. The problem he is setting is one you haven't got a great solution for yet. So at that point, you could start bringing in players that either fight like him, if you're very lucky, or you could start constraining their practice partners to try and behave like him, which is more difficult. But again, you can say anytime your partner scores when they have a high overhand left-handed grip, it's worth 10 points. Anytime they do anything else, it's worth 1. First person to 10 points wins. Anything you do is worth 1. So frequently, the players that are playing against them will try and exploit these grips so that they can try and win the games, right? They'll win against the person they're training with. That would be one of the big things I'd look to do. And then I suspect that we're in a position that if they've won everything, at that point, I suspect that we're going down into the realms of sports psychology more than anything. It's a really difficult place to be, I think. The transitions out of sport are really, really difficult. And the transition when you get to the top must be awful. Like, genuinely, it must be awful to achieve your dream. Like, you've spent 25 years trying to get an Olympic gold medal, and you finally get it, and you wake up the next day, and you make your cornflakes, you put your slippers on, you go downstairs. You're great. Yeah, sports psychologist at that point, I think.
Yeah. if
And
not well
ironically, yeah,
before.
yeah. No, it's a thing that is noticeable. I think when you see people that get to these points. I remember reading, what was his face, the Kurt Angle, the guy that was in the WWF, when he'd won his Olympic gold medals. He was just like, oh, great, now what? And then he'd, let's say, conquered the fake wrestling, scripted wrestling, it's not fake, world. He'd got to a point that he was really good there and had retired. And he was again in this position like, now what? And people go through these huge depressions when they achieve their goals. So yeah, I appreciate nothing to do with skill acquisition, but I think it is an important point.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, so much to discuss. So glad we have so much time. Again, I don't know how much time you have. I got a lot. Um, how often you're using a lot of these point systems, it sounds like. I
Mm-hmm.
haven't played with that so much yet. I'll be excited to after talking with you. How often do you feel students exploit that in ways that are unproductive for learning? And what, if any, strategies do you have to like prevent that? And how does it tend to happen? What's that all like?
Yeah, so with kids, it's never an issue because kids want the points. They are they're predisposed to want to win little pointless games in training. It matters to them. The 40-year-old with two kids and a mortgage isn't really that interested in 5 points in a game. So I've found it really useful to just be completely open and frank and explain why you're using them. So once I have made the point, I get that you don't care about points. That's not why we're doing it. We're doing it because I know that you have these skills already in your game, and I'm trying to make you try these things and explore how these skills fit in with all the stuff you can already do. If you just do the stuff you can already do, you'll be the same player you are today in 10 years' time. Like, my dad has driven a car for 50 years. He is an appalling driver. Like, he's terrifying. You sat in the car and you're constantly afraid. It's because he's driven a car for 50 years, but he's not tried to get better. He's just got in a car and driven. He's not trying to find how he can curve off an extra 3 seconds on this corner or how late he can brake. I know nothing about cars. Car things. He's not trying to maximize his driving. He just drives. If you turn up and you just go out and do sparring, you just do free practice, you're just doing the skills you already have. You already are well attuned to those things. Those affordances are available to you. The point system is purely to make you explore new things and to integrate them into your game. If you don't want points, we can say, you win a bottle of whiskey, your dad will tell you he's proud of you. That girl that you fancied in school's going to ring up and tell you that you were cute. Like, whatever it is, I want that thing to be attracted to you, so you explore it. And having, done it, used the point system as a scalpel and a club for a long time, when people are aware why you're doing it, they tend to understand and engage. Yeah, you get the odd person, but it's the same odd person that wouldn't engage with anything anyway. They're just there because they, want to kill, crush, and destroy. And yeah, at that point, literally nothing you can do will stop them from just wanting to kill, crush, destroy. But yeah.
So if I'm understanding that right, so you're saying most of the problems you encounter are not really from, and this probably just means you're setting up the point systems well, but it sounds like most of the ways you're setting up the point systems, the actual biggest problem you run into with that is not them exploiting the points in ways that are unproductive for learning. It's that they just don't care about the points enough to try to explore the thing that you're trying to incentivize them to explore.
Yeah, so as I say, it hasn't been an issue for me because I've been direct with them. I've consulted with quite a few coaches and I've belaboured the point that these little point systems are really useful for shaping people's attention and intention. Another tongue twister. And they have come back and said, "Yeah, I tried, but like they just didn't care about the points." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, but they're grown-ups. you can you can have a conversation with them and explain why you're using them. Like, I suppose it makes sense. It might feel a little uh, manipulative. It might feel as though somebody's trying to curtail your actions too much if you aren't explicit with them and literally say, "No, I am doing. I'm trying to make you do these things. I want you to do these things so you get better at them. Go." Yeah, but I think people tend to. If you're in a really competitive club, so you've got people that are on international programs, they're competing nationally, they really, really care about winning. At that point, they'll probably care about the points. If they don't, if they think that it's too juvenile or whatever, one of the things that I've had one of the guys I consult for do is he has a ranking system. So after you and your partner have fought, if you had more points than your partner, you move to the left. If you had less points, you move to the right.
Ooh.
So I know, I know, it's a very competitive club. It's not for dad of two that's just turning up because he wants to roll around with his friends. So if the players are in a position that they can deal with being the man at the bottom of the mat, that's a really useful way of getting them to care about the points. It really would, it's a little bit bringing a blunderbuss to a knife fight, but it absolutely can work. Yeah.
There are some people that I can imagine setting something up like that where it's like, if we did, we're gonna kill each other by the end of this.
Absolutely. But I bet there'd be a lot of the thing that you're looking for them to try and do, right?
Oh yeah, we're gonna get those points. Someone's gonna get them.
Absolutely.
Um, this is an interesting thing too, because a lot of people, like, I would say, mischaracterize ecological dynamics as like, it's just sparring, it's just situational training, right? And almost separately from that, but sort of related, I want to push you a little bit on how much do you really think someone would progress or not progress if they really just did sparring? Because aren't they still, like, they are continually attuning to information sources, right? If they're intentional about it. I think one of the big things with deliberate practice that they're saying that we agree with is you have to be focused and intentional when you're practicing, right? Just like the example you're giving with your dad driving, or really with any of us driving. And there's actually research to support this in a lot of different fields that, for instance, with doctors, there's a lot of tests you can do with doctors where they're experts, very knowledgeable, very skilled. And yet there's a lot of things where the doctors with like 3 years of experience, 1 year of experience, test better than the ones with 20 years of experience.
Yeah.
Why? Because it's like, well, they're not forced to improve their skills every day as a doctor, right? Like and this is kind of what we need for healthcare, right? We want doctors where the skill is up here and the skill we need them to have is down here, right? And not that they're actually, being challenged about their level every day. But that leads to decay of skill in general, right? For most of them. And so where we seem to align on this with deliberate practice is when we're focused, like the less focused practice probably doesn't matter so much, right? But say they're just doing free sparring, just as a thought experiment. What's your perspective? They're just doing free sparring. They do really care about it. They are showing up and they are really intentional. They are really focused. Say it's just generally, though, trying to win. How much progress do you think that athlete would make?
They could win IBJJF events and ADCC events. Like, we're in a position that you could get very, very good by training that way. The issue is the time that it takes and the frequency with which you, as a coach, can guide players towards that position. So if I just set them to do that, there will be an unbelievably dense graveyard of players that didn't make it to a high level. They'll be broken, they'll have quit, their skill sets will have just plateaued, they've not been tested enough. But there will be some people that rise to the top and become the best player on earth. if that was all everyone did, right? We know this because this has happened. We have loads and loads of players that have this. You end up with these post hoc justifications where they say, I am now an Olympic gold medalist. When I was young, I did kata. So kata made me an Olympic gold medalist. And they overlook the fact that they were also training 36 hours a week with 50 of the best players on earth constantly doing sparring. They were doing it day in, day out. Like, that might be the thing that got you good, right? It's really easy for us to have this. As a species, we do this all the time. We infer causation where it doesn't exist. So, I use the analogy of the Greeks combing their hair before battle. They butchered a bunch of people and they were so calm, they were brushing their hair before the battle. It wasn't the brushing the hair that made them good. It was all the training. Like if I just went, oh, right, well, I'm going to brush my hair. The Greeks did really well in battle. That's a false cause and effect. I have inferred one where there isn't one, right? And I think we end up in this position that the percentage chance that somebody will come to the top, there is always a lottery winner, right? One person wins the lottery. Most times it's on. The chance of you being the lottery winner in those conditions is very, very low. If we just have them, if we throw a knife in the room and say the last one signing gets out, somebody will get out. There will be one person that becomes good, right? But if we can actually design practice tasks that more purposefully shape what they are doing, we're making them look at certain things and attend to certain packets of information so they can learn to do stuff with it more purposefully, I think that has a much, much greater effect. And more importantly, we build a higher base of people that could be the one that then bursts up. It's not this sort of talent graveyard of a lot of people that didn't make it because the conditions were shite. Yeah. It's a really frustrating thing when you have people that have come through a system and they infer false causation. And they go, well, you've not got a gold medal. You've not won IBJJF. Like, yeah, I know. Yeah, cool.
But like, here's the science. Does anyone want to read it?
Like, I know.
Who needs that?
I know.
Where are the medals?
You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them think.
Oh boy. Okay, so yeah, and I'll just say on the record, I'm not going to name any names, but I think there's definitely some people that I know that it's exactly like what you're saying, that they've made it very high up in grappling. And it's like, I don't think we can attribute their progress to the drilling they were doing. Like it doesn't make sense. The research isn't there. The experience isn't there. It statistically, it is like you're saying, like there's the one kind of random guy, and the rest of the guys that are doing the same drilling, they're not getting there. And also, the thing that would make this argument so clear cut is like, and I think this is a little bit, you had said somewhere before that this is one of the things that pointed you towards eco as well, was in judo they have like sort of kata specialization, right? And you see how well those kata specialists that do the beautiful techniques that we think would be exactly what you need in a actual competitive performance, and you can say better than I can, how well do they do in competition?
Yeah, not great. No, I think it's an obvious thing when you attend to it for any amount of time. Like the easy analogy for most of the world, except America, I imagine, is in soccer, in football. Like the Man United team of the 70s were just drinking all the time. They were just, after every game, on the lash, no attending to their physical conditioning. They were just incredibly good at football, and they won lots of stuff. Like, cool. So can we then say drinking means they got good? They can look back and go, oh no, well, we did all these things, And George Best, one of the best players to have ever lived, was an alcoholic. He died from liver failure. Like, that guy won the Ballon d'Or. He was the best player on earth one year. Can you then go and say, oh, well, no, it's fine for George, so I might as well just get drunk before every game? Like, no, of course you can't do that. We have to look at the mechanisms at play that mean these things work or don't work, and then apply it across the board. We can't say there is a golden statue of a human being. Let's just copy all the stuff he does. No, he's the person that survived the talent graveyard. He got there in spite of his training and his conditions, especially when you're in a position that the majority of people that were doing the same stuff at the same time were doing things in the same way. So all of the teams were just on the lash constantly, drinking, not taking care of themselves, were just doing shitty, aggressive practice tasks. Someone has to win. In judo, there's some guys that are starting to use an ecological approach, but it's probably the case that most of the best players on earth are still doing uchikomi, they're still doing nagakomi. The reason they're doing it is not for skill development, overwhelmingly these days, thank God. They're kind of doing it as part of a warm-up, so they're doing it for like effectivities building. And I think at some point, most coaches have started to realize it's nonsensical. But it's not across the board. Like, I'm too far in now to not say it. We had a guy who was a national coach for us that had, he came up to North Wales to deliver a session, and he had a tape that was playing Greek music. He's a Greek coach. And we had to do uchikomi in time with Greek music. So it's the... I'm like, the national coach has come up to deliver a session, and it was uchikomi in time to music. Yeah. So, and that guy had coached Olympic athletes. Like, I think that they might even have medalled. We can't infer that people's practice tasks cause success when someone is successful. We can look mechanistically at why practice tasks may or may not be effective and then apply them across the board and test them. But to backtrack and backfill is nigh on impossible. We can't say with any kind of accuracy because we can't isolate factors. Like, if they never do randori, then we can probably say the prancing about dancing worked. But if they are doing loads and loads of sparring against some of the best athletes on earth, you can't infer anything. You just can't.
You're preaching to the choir here.
I know, sorry. I can feel myself on a soapbox there. I'll climb down.
It's so great because then I don't have to say it so much. But I want to reinforce a little bit too. Like I say this over and over because, like you're saying, we see it over and over, and there's something inherent about movement where we just see the expert performers and we think, God, they must be doing it right because they're so good. Look at them, they're so good. And we forget about like kind of all of the fundamental principles of science. It's not controlled in any way. There's so many variables that go into like how a person competes and the competitive success that they have, right? And so all these different things. And usually I totally agree. It is like absolutely, in general, people succeeding mostly despite the practices they're doing rather than because of them. And what happens, think about this. So there's all the genetic variations, right? There's all the psychological variations. And mostly there's like, man, champions are generally people with like the most insane discipline and willpower that, there was a wrestler talking the other day. He was saying like, he's like, man, I lost, but I'm doing everything right. You know, I'm wearing the bamboo underwear.
Yeah.
You know, and those are the people that become champions. Is generally not the people that stop to think, is the bamboo underwear scientifically supported and empirically validated? They're the people that don't think about it and just freaking do everything. right? And if you're doing everything hard 8 hours a day when your competitors are doing 2, then your 1 hour of drilling a day is more effective than their 0 hours of drilling a day. And you might think that's the secret to your success. And maybe also it gives you a psychological edge because you're like, I'm drilling while they're lazy at home, right? And you have that confidence in your head that you work harder than they do, right? That's a factor.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the genetic thing is overwhelmingly at play at an elite level. Like, me and Usain Bolt could do the exact same training program. I could mirror him 1 for 1, eat the same meals as him, and I am not breaking 10 seconds on 100 meter sprint. I'm not breaking 11. I'm not breaking 15. Like, it's probably not going to happen. Like, there are certain genetic gifts that he has that no amount of training, no amount of perfect practice tasks are going to overcome for me. And we'd like to think that our sort of less linear sports, like where it's not just from A to B, are less reliant on physical outputs. But if they were, there wouldn't be such a huge steroid problem, right? We are in a position that your effectivities affect the affordances you can take, right? So if I was juiced to the gills and was an absolute genetic freak, it literally wouldn't matter. Like, nothing that I had done up to that point would make much difference. I saw a video the other day, actually, that was, I think it was an Olympic judo player against the strongman. The strongman was being shown some throws. And the guy just picked him up and smashed him to the floor. And the judo guy's going, that's not the move I showed you. Like, no, it's really not. It's not the move, but he's a big boy. Like, no amount of you trying to break his balance is going to work when he is just a beast. Like, at a certain point, being a big boy helps. Like, we have weight categories for a reason. Physical stuff makes a difference. Yeah, I'm over it. Could have been a contender. If only had the right drugs.
and that video is so funny because they keep talking about, like, they're like, oh, they're like, you didn't use we showed you all the moves, And it's like, of course he's not going to use the moves you had him drill for, 20 minutes. Like, he's a trained elite strongman. He's going to be able to attune to affordances that for him, he talks about, like, it's like picking up the stones. Right?
Yeah.
He's picking up stones twice this guy's weight. Well, all right, I'm going to pick him up like a stone.
And good luck trying to stop him. My Lord.
Right?
Yeah, I think there's a big part of it, really, that we really underplay these characteristics. Like, imagine if you just had some of these, like, world's strongest men powerlifter types just turn up. Well, we had it, didn't we? There was, what was his name? Pudzianowski, Polish guy who was world's strongest man for years on end. Mariusz Pudzianowski. I apologize for butchering his name. He went into MMA and fought one of the Gracies and just pulverized him. Like, was an ex-world's strongest man. He was a freak of nature. Like, he's not kicked on with it, but he was able to beat someone who was a BJJ specialist just with Hulk smash stuff, Yeah, it matters. Being strong helps.
Yeah. So there's a story I'm tempted to tell really quick of very briefly, and then we'll get back to judo stuff. But the story goes that the first man to ever squat 1,000 pounds, before every training session, like, he would drink the night before every training session, and then he would train hungover. And his thing was that, like, when he competes, he's not going to drink the day before. And finally, for once, he can lift sober. And it's like, that is so clearly like a terrible idea. And yet is the first man to ever squat 1,000 pounds. Like, should we now go out and drink before all our training sessions? No.
I don't know. You've convinced me.
Anyway, back to judo. So you talked about. Okay, actually, I'm gonna switch questions. would you ever have someone drill a movement repetitively against an unresistant opponent? And if so, when and why?
Good question. Yes, but with massive caveats that I will now offer. Essentially, I think we're in a position that people use the word drill really loosely. So people have used the word drill to just mean like practice tasks or thing that has been set for you to do, whereas drill essentially has come from military tradition, right? Like, was it Frederick the Great had a revolution in how people approached military training and started having people do military drill. Going back to ye olde times, like the phalanx worked from drill. People would make a call in the heat of battle. If you didn't respond to the thing they said at that time, everything would fall undone. So they would just drill you. You would do rote repetition with the purpose of instilling a mechanical response to something, right? That's not why I drill, right? I would have people do a few repetitions of a thing for a number of different reasons. One of them being safety. It might be that we're lifting a human being up and throwing them on the floor. There's an inherent degree of risk that comes with that, that maybe if they're a complete novice and they've never been thrown before, or they've never thrown somebody before, I might have them do a couple of repetitions against a brain dead partner stood like this, so that they can get a basic understanding of how to coordinate some sort of a lift, what it looks like and feels like, and so they can land from a throw and learn how to absorb forces. It isn't with the intention of them becoming skillful at performing the thing they are drilling. It's just creating a basic, this is roughly what a good one looks like. It's a bit like this. It's not exactly this. It's these are the sorts of things you would do to solve this problem. When we go in and play our game, try and do something that's a bit like this to achieve the goals that we've set. So to refine their search space towards certain outcomes and to let them know that things exist. I think this is a really important factor. You know, something like Beren is a great example and is used to death, so I apologise for bringing it up again. A Beren probably would occur naturally if you let people fight for a long enough time. They would end up doing it. It would happen a lot more if you said, oh, by the way, there's a thing you can do. We call it a Beren looks a bit like this. When you're playing, if you can get to that position, I'll give you a bottle of whiskey. They will probably get to Beren a lot quicker that way than if I'd never ever explained it, right? I have shown them what the thing is. They've gone, oh, that's the thing I can do. Didn't know. And we press play and let them play the game. So they might have done 2 or 3 attempts at it to learn how roughly to coordinate themselves into those positions, and then they develop the skill live against an opponent. So my answer is safety, and so that you can refine their search space, so they're aware of what things are and roughly how they feel, and then you plug them straight back in. So I refer to it as signposting. One of the guys that I work with calls it landmarking, and I've started using them interchangeably. So if I say signposting or landmarking, that's what I mean. You're just showing this is sort of what it looks like. It's a bit like this. My partner's an infants teacher, teaches little tiny ones, and they have a thing called a waggle, what a good one looks like. So when they're doing some sort of practice, this is what a good one looks like. Now you go and finger paint or whatever it is. She's going to kill me for saying all they do is finger paint. But yeah, it's what a good one looks like. Go and have a go at doing something like that. So I see it as a waggle, really.
So when you have them do those 2-3 repetitions at the beginning, they've never done a throw before, they've never been thrown before, they do the 2 to 3 reps. Are you having them, why not have them try to do it in the perfect way?
Yeah, so sometimes we do, like with massive caveats. So we'll explain where mechanical efficiency is. We'll explain why people choose to do it like this. So let's say for any form of a hip throw, if I'm bending my knees and not hinging at my hips, I can create more force. It's easier for me to lift you with this, like this makes any sense, with like a deadlift or a squat action than it is with a good morning action, right? You can just move more force. So mechanically, it is more efficient with the trade-off that I don't do mine anything like that. So we might have them do it and explain this is why we are doing it this way, but you don't have to. This is just one of the ways to do it. I am showing you this way because it's more mechanically efficient, but there's massive variability. The same with something like a Tayatoshi, the turning you back and blocking their leg and pushing you over. The version that I tend to do with beginners has their feet with 50% weight on each leg, purely because it helps them learn how to produce force in a pushing action more easily. It stops being rotational and starts being a pushy thing. So by showing them that version, it's kind of shaping them towards this as a finish rather than this as a finish. And it's purely because I think it's safer on your leg. They don't end up having people come down and dropping their knees on your calf muscle. And again, we can produce more force that way. So you kind of get a feeling in your hands of what it feels like when your partner is out of balance. Just because obviously if I'm in, what do they call it, horse stance sort of position, and I'm here pushing, this is probably more stable than if I've got one leg. You can't see me. Why am I doing it? Where I have one leg off the floor and I'm rotating. So it isn't that I would never show them perfect technique. It's that there is a huge caveat of this is why we're doing it this way, but you don't have to. Like, there are multiple Olympic champions or ADCC champions or IBJJF champions that do these things and they don't look like this. So explore this space.
And also just when we have that ideal perfect technique, that starts to discount the students' functional solutions that are always like the perfect functional solution for each person is always going to be different, right? They have a different body. How could they have exactly the same perfect solution, even if there was a perfect solution, even if it was a static problem, right? Like the problem is never the same, but even if it was, then the solution, like,
yeah, absolutely. You know, the way that your opponent is moving kind of makes a big difference, right? The way I coordinate myself to throw somebody that is walking sideways, backwards, forwards, circling is totally different. I have to change all of those things. There's a soft assembly that's going on to coordinate all of these structures into a position that I can execute a sufficient version of a named move. There's so much chaos that perfect technique is, a misnomer. But I think guiding their search space so that they're aware of why certain things are more preferable to others in certain positions and certain times, there's still value in that. I think
sure.
we can end up in a position that we embrace the chaos so much that they're not able to attend to any information signal because there's so many information signals. So we're sort of turning the volume up on some bits, but not turning the volume off on others, just turning it down. Yeah.
Yeah. And even also, like, even if the opponent was moving in like a very similar way, it's also they're still perceiving different things and intending different things. And it's like, well, again, like maybe you want to trick them, like that could be just as functionally useful as doing the more mechanically optimal throw, right? But so we talked a little bit about like safety things, and I think judo is a very interesting sport where it at least seems like it's so explosive and powerful and potentially quite risky, right? And so it becomes a big emphasis on breakfalling and how do you turn these throws into falls or rolls where we're absorbing that kinetic energy over a longer period of time, right? Spreading that over time so it's less of a damaging impact. And in traditional judo schools that I actually trained like this for a few months in judo, I'm not sure to what degree they're all like this, but I was taught for 2 weeks, you're not allowed to do anything but breakfalls. And actually, how we're doing that is we're just going to repeat. You're going to stand and fall backwards and slap the mat. And you're going to do that 200 times today, and then I'll see you on Thursday. And then you're going to roll forward and slap the mat 200 times. And that's what we're doing, right? And so that's a really big area where I think because of the safety concern, I'm loving your face right now.
I'm not surprised he didn't stick at it. It doesn't sound very fun. Good Lord.
It was funny because I actually really loved the instructor, and he was very good in a lot of ways. And near the end, I was trying to like kind of work with him. Again, I wasn't familiar with ecological dynamics at all at the time, but it was still like, dude, where's the perception action coupling here? Like there's still many, many problems with this. And I was trying to work with him on like, how can we make this better? You know, like how can we, at that point, I was thinking of like progressive resistance, you know, like can we just add some progressive resistance to the like uchikomi and the nagikomi and make it slightly more representative, you know? So yeah. But so anyway, so with the breakfalls, a lot of people, I think right now, seem to think that because of the safety concerns and because it can be so dangerous, that we need to really repeat and like drill these movements to death so that they are just installed deep in your brain and you don't have to ever think about it and it can just be recalled so fast. And so I think so many of us are really interested to hear how you approach teaching breakfalls and falling in judo.
I don't. Basically, we're essentially in a position that I think that the dangers of it are a little overhyped. Like, I've coached for 21 years, for a long time, and less than 5 broken bones in that time. Not me, the people I'm coaching. It's not anywhere near as dangerous as the perception is, I think. I think we end up in a position that as people get older, they can't absorb the forces as easily. So if you're 60, being thrown repeatedly can become a bit more wearing. But essentially, we're in a position that you're not teaching them breakfalls. As you basically suggested yourself, we're increasing the resistance of the types of things that they are going through. So our first game might just be a picking somebody up game, where we're developing a bunch of skill but keeping the impact level really low. And then the whole thing might just be then bumped up one tiny degree, so that they're going, once they're in the air, the game stops, you have won, but you're going to take them over so they can land. I'm not going to worry about breakfalls, I'm not going to tell you anything other than keep your chin in and try and slap the floor if you can. That's it. I think the only salient bit of information that people need when they're being thrown is to keep their chin tucked onto their chest. That's it. Like, being winded is uncomfortable. Like, it's not the best day at the office, but you're not going to have any long-term problems from being winded. If your brain keeps getting rattled through the floor, that's more of an issue. So chin tucked in is definitely something that we would point out. But yeah, it's not learning breakfalls, it's gradually increasing the amount of impact that they have as they go through practice tasks. So it might be that we're playing a game where the impact is going to be really low because of the type of throw we're picking. It's going to be one where you're doing this, not this, right? If it is something that has a really, really high... So there are some throws that have huge levels of impact, like uranagis, like reverse suplexes. If I pick you up above my head and flop you on the floor behind me, that would probably cause some damage. If you're against the novice, if you're against somebody who's not done much judo, don't do that to them. Use your noodle. It's enough to say that I have picked you up. At this point, we both know you are doomed. I can put you back down on the floor. Yeah, so I suppose that's all it is, really. It's gradually increasing the amount of impact in the landings, but I don't even really do that to much of a degree. If you turn up and the session we're doing is hip throws, I will go over and assist you, so you do a couple of throws where you're learning how to land, and then we play the game. Like, people aren't made of glass. They don't break that easily. And yeah, people don't, they just don't get that hurt. Like, I've not had the experience that it has been an issue for me. Um, yeah, I appreciate it's not a very satisfactory answer for guys that want like breakfall-y practice stuff. But I suppose we're also in a position. I had a chat with one of the guys who's doing my British Judo course, who I think he's one of the national coaches at the minute, runs a really successful club, and he doesn't teach any breakfalls at any age. Just they can never do breakfalls. His isn't as a perception action thing where they're learning to land in context. His is purely that if they breakfall in contest, the referee's more likely to give a score against them. So he doesn't want them doing this breakfall. He wants them trying to not land on their back. It's not a breakfall, it's a And I completely agree with the premise. Like, I don't want them landing on their back. I don't want them doing a big loud breakfall. I want them learning to, I suppose it'd be proprioceptive, wouldn't it? Would it? No, proprioceptive. What's the one where you know where your arms are?
Proprioceptive.
Proprioception, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
I know the word. Yeah, so it's a proprioceptive thing rather than a conditioned response. It's where is my body in space? And the only way we can become well attuned to that is by having your body whizzed around in space. Your training partners are really important, obviously. If I've got a complete novice on, we're blessed that we don't really have any knobheads, but I wouldn't put them on with knobhead Dave that's just there because he's angry. I'd put them on with somebody who is skilled enough to throw their partner without hurting them. But yeah, I think we're in a position that everybody knows that everybody else has to go to work, school, or wherever tomorrow. Look after your training partners. We don't need to specifically breakfall unopposed on our own for a whole session for 2 weeks before we're allowed to do anything. Just look after your partner. They'll keep their chin tucked in so their brain doesn't get scrambled. And every now and then you'll have a heavy landing where somebody gets a bit winded and they get up and go, oh, that was a good one. And then they carry on. Like, there is an extra caveat. Also, we tell people not to reach. So it's a really, really difficult thing not to do for beginners to try and put the hand on the floor. But this is why we have this gradual increase in the amount of force that's put in, and the quality of partner that we're playing with is more variable. So if I'm doing a right-handed throw, I have a right-handed grip, but I'm doing a left-handed throw. So my hand is on it's going to be confusing. My right hand is on your left collar rather than on your left sleeve. If I throw you going that direction, there's nothing holding your arm. If I'm holding your arm, I can pull your arm so it doesn't touch the floor. If I'm holding your collar, the temptation to put it down is really, really high. So if I know that there is a person that does left-handed throws with a right-handed grip, we've got a brown belt in our club that's got some beautiful left-handed attacks off right-handed grips. I'd expressly say to them, make sure they don't put the hand on the floor. And I'd say to the person being thrown, you're going to reach to try and put your hand on the floor. It's a natural response. Try and fight it. Over time, it will be beaten out of you. You'll end up not doing it. But yeah, that's the only other danger, really. Heads being smashed in and breaking arms when they're placed on the floor. Everything else, the impacts are so low. Especially in BJJ, when people are sort of cautious about doing standing in BJJ, you're mostly doing singles and doubles. Like you're just tripping people up. They're flopping onto the floor in slow motion or pulling guard. Shame on them. Like the impacts are just tiny.
Yeah. And also I think part of what you're saying here too is we don't need to teach the break falling in such an isolated way because it's integrated into the practice that you're being thrown all the time, and every time you're being thrown you have to find a way to either not be thrown or when you are thrown not get injured, right?
It's literally that, isn't it? You find a coordinative pattern to dissipate force subconsciously. You're not intentionally doing it, but you're being thrown enough times that you start to move into a position that you land with your weight being more, you're able to dissipate the force using where you're landing your body. Yeah, but again, we're in the position that the primary concern of a player isn't landing safely. It's not. If you're throwing me, I don't care about safety. I care about winning advantage.
Mm.
That's it. Can I get into a guard? Can I get into a position that your chances of transitioning effectively are reduced? I don't want me going, oh no, the floor. Ah. I want you going, holy crap, now's my chance. I can get in to do my dun da 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 da. Right?
Right. I'll also add, I've almost from day one been very suspicious of the whole slap the mat idea. And I think that, yeah, again, there's maybe some like mechanical reasoning here that, if you can put some force into your arm, and maybe that's reducing some of this kinetic energy, spreading that out more. But again, like you're saying, like your friend is doing, that's not realistic to the competition practice. And I actually remember there's a quite a high level match at ADCC West Coast Trials, and one of the guys got thrown, and he slapped the mat. And in a match, in one of the most important matches, it's like that is so non-functional,
2 points.
right? Yeah. So we need to be like doing this in a real live representative scenario, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. I think the whole thing could be undercut by just don't be a knob to your training partner. It's the same as heel hooks, right? There's a degree of risk in heel hooks if you're being a bit of a knob, right? If I'm in a position that I know it's enough for me to capture your toe line and to have my forearm under your heel, at this point, both of us know you are doomed. I don't have to talk the living hell out. Yeah, it's unnecessary. The person caught in it knows, more often than not, if we ended up here, I would have to risk injury to try and escape. Same if I've got an arm lock and it's hyperextending your elbow. In training, we go and we tap. Sometimes, if I'm like a really competitive player, I'm probably going to go, right, well, I'm not going to tap until it's really on because I want to try and learn how I can escape at the really, really, you're in deep shit territory. But I don't do that every training session all the time. I'd have no elbows left, right? We don't go, oh, how do we train arm lock safely? Well, yeah, don't be a knob. Like, so for judo, you can't do arm locks or strangles until you are 14. They are against the rules for kids. So judo people think, oh, how do you guys teach arm locks and strangles safely? Like, it's a question you just think, that's ridiculous. That's a whole sport, right? It's the same here. Like, how do you get people to land safely? They do judo. Like, you get thrown a lot, you get good at landing from stuff. I think that's the point.
awesome. Yeah, at Groundworks we have like they have like a whole system of like, if you're going with we do heel hooks at every level. But it's like, if you're going with a novice, there's a whole system of like, I catch the heel and I look at you and we make eye contact, and it's like level one is like, I don't even let you tap, like I'm going to tap for you,
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
you don't even know what this is like yet, right? And level 2 is like, okay, you catch it with one hand, right? Level 3, okay, you catch both hands around the heel. And then level 4 is like, okay, now you can actually apply it, and then, have your partner tap according to like how much pressure is actually on their leg. But yeah, it's really easy to do this sort of stuff.
Yeah, no, I very much agree. I'm the same. It could be your first session, and if it just so happens that we're looking at heel hooks that week, you'll be playing a bunch of heel hook games. Like, and we've, touch wood, I'm not superstitious, I don't know I did that. We've never had any leg injuries from heel hooks at all.
Yeah.
We had one guy blow a knee from somebody landing on him when we were doing throws once. That's the only knee injury I think we've ever had in 21 years.
Wow.
I know,
Nice.
right?
Yeah.
Considering we're alive most of the time, how we're not broken, I really don't know.
I have a funny story, because I mean, I'm a movement teacher, so I teach everything. And the most intense injury I ever had anyone get was a falling 2.5 pound plate that he was taking a weight off of the squat rack. So he was focused on the bigger weight. He was grabbing the bigger weight.
Yeah, yeah.
There's the tiny 2.5 pound weight on the end. It just falls off, lands on his pinky toe, and fractures it. That's the worst injury I ever. It's like
Yeah.
these things are crazy and so interesting. But
Yeah, no, it's an odd one, isn't it? Like, I think we're in a position that we know that the sport has inherent danger, so people attend to that while they're doing it. It's I've always found that of all the sports I've ever done, I've done judo, I've done all sorts of grappling, I've played rugby, still try and play rugby. Football, playing soccer, is the one that has been most injurious. So all the change of direction, all the people coming from weird angles and catching your ankles and knees. It's just so much more injurious than anything else I've ever done. And no one ever thinks, oh no, I wouldn't let my kids play football. They're going to end up injured all the bloody time.
Sure. Yeah. That's awesome to hear, honestly. That's really great to hear. So for judo, what's your kind of like larger perspective of the skills that players need to build, and what sort of games do you like to use to build each of those things?
Yeah, in all honesty, it's the same sport as BJJ. We do the same stuff. It's the difference between the two are just the rule sets bias certain things more. So throwing somebody has more value because we can win outright from a throw on the back. So we attend to that probably more than groundworky stuff. But my view on it, my perspective for judo is we very rarely finish a bout off the first throw. It doesn't really happen very often at all unless there's a real mismatch in skill. So there will be loads and loads of throws that are executed that are unsuccessful. It will transition to the floor with neither person having won. And a lot of judo clubs don't attend to groundwork at all. Like they do 20%, they'll do a little bit, and it's 1970s judo. They're not great down there. So for me, I'm a huge believer in the transition phase being the massive differentiator at the level that it is now. And I think it should probably bleed into judo pretty soon, now that there's so many players cross-training. So the IJF, the Olympic Judo Federation, have rules that judo players can't compete in any other sport while they're doing judo. So if you're a player that is in the IJF's register, if you're competing in any international event, you can't turn up and have a go at an IBJJF event or an ADCC event. So judo players are getting to a point that they're only starting to explore BJJ after they have retired. So we've got people like Owen Livesey and Fionn Davis and loads of people that are moving into BJJ after they have had a successful judo career. Like, I think the level of players is going to get to a point that these guys that are experienced in BJJ will start training with these guys and they will get better. So the fact that there are judo players who are training BJJ, even if they can't compete in it yet, is probably going to bleed in that at a certain point, the newaza, the groundwork stuff in judo is going to stop being shit. And I think that referees will start to become less useless as well. So as it stands, referees, I'll caveat that, less useless at spotting groundwork stuff. It's an awful job. I wouldn't want to be a referee, and they're very good at what they do. Please be favourable when my guys compete. But you tend to find that so the rule set is, after there's been a throw, the groundwork carries on while there's progress being made. So it's an indeterminate amount of time if that entire time you're getting closer and closer and closer to a finish. If not, after there's sort of a passive moment for an amount of time the referee thinks that's enough, they'll stand you up. The referees have been really poor at the level that my guys compete at knowing when there's progress being made. So they stand them up and you're like, the fuck are you doing? He's about to arm lock someone. So my version of coaching now is like I very rarely do any coaching from the chair in the fight. Like, what can I do now? Like, the only thing I can offer is perspectives of stuff that I can see that they might not be able to see because they are in the fight, and narrating the fight for the referee. That's pretty much all I do. So as soon as they land on the floor, I'll be saying, really good, you've isolated the arm, you've opened it up from his ribs, that's really good progress being made. Like, literally letting them know what is happening so that they can see that they're actually getting closer to doing nasty, damaging things. I think that the more better groundwork is in the sport, and the more referees, people that have done both sports, the more groundwork is going to become more and more effective. So I think the future is probably going to be these really, really effective transitioners from standing to groundwork. Probably one of the best judo players Britain's had for a long, long time. Craig Fallon. They changed judo's rules because the way he was winning, they didn't like, essentially. He pretended to do a sumigashi, which is basically he would sit down into a butterfly guard and he would do a butterfly sweep and would win from there. And they changed the rules. They said that for a sacrifice throw, there has to be a clear break of balance for it to be counted as an attack, because he was basically pulling guard into a butterfly sweep and winning a lot. So I think there'll be a lot more of that coming in. So, sorry, the question was, what do I do? Mostly it's that. We'll look at bleeding out between phases. So one of the things that I harp on about constantly, making sure when we're covering a specific thing, a type of thing that's a phase of play for a block. So let's say we're going to spend a week on, let's use BJJ, we're going to spend a week on guard passing. Mm-hmm. Cool. Let's say a month, sorry. We're going to spend a month on guard passing. In that time, the important thing isn't just becoming competent in guard. It's understanding that guard exists with these, like, temporal nested affordances that come. They emerge in decay on the phase of play leading into the guarded position and on the phase of play falling out of guarded position. So if I just do guard, it doesn't let me learn to pick up on all of the specified information of what happens when I'm coming into a guard. How do we end up here? Is it from ankle picks? Is it from guard pulls? Is it from double legs? Is it from single legs? How are we getting to this position? We need to spend a bunch of time saturating that transition from here to here. And then I've passed guard. Cool. Now what, right? What I don't want is for me to do guard passing for a month, and then a month later I'm going to do pins, and the pins don't come from a guard pass. They've come from me starting in a pin. Well, how did I end up here? If it's come from a guard pass, that comes with its own criteria of different affordances that have emerged and decayed in the process of me passing. It's not as neat and tidy as, and now I'm here, so I'm going to do stuff from here. Mm-hmm. So I think that's probably the majority of the stuff we do. It's looking at phases of play that lead into and out of the thing we're looking at. So for me, the stand-up phase is glorious. It's my favourite thing on earth, except for my kids. Well, yeah. I adore it. But after there has been a throw, if it is successful or unsuccessful, are we getting into a position that we can take advantage of the fact that we've been able to take our partner down? Or can we steal the advantage back, take the initiative off them if we have been caught with a throw? If they have thrown me, we're going to presume the referee hasn't scored it because, obviously, what can I do? How do I get advantage and win from here? A whole bunch of that. And it's the same after we have done a pass from a guard and we have secured our pin. Now what? Yeah.
I think this is a huge problem in the way many coaches are doing jiu-jitsu right now.
I very much agree.
It's the games they're these slices, right? They're starting from this position. And it seems like we often are completely forgetting about the transition into that position. And like you're saying, out of that position, that is super important.
Yep.
And so one of the things, and again, it's like, this is pretty new for a lot of coaches. Like it's a cool thing, especially in jiu-jitsu, where the adoption is like really taking off. which is so awesome. And what you have to say for jiu-jitsu coaches, like, as much as there is resistance, and like we're saying, like, of course there has to be resistance because people care about what they're doing. But though there is resistance, they are like biting on the concept and engaging and discussing it. And like, man, what more could you want? Like, for instance, I think the movement community right now, the people that are kind of more adjacent to what I'm doing of like, how do we teach general skill? I think their approach so far has been, oh, ecological dynamics, like, that's nothing new. Like, we've been using tasks forever. Like, they don't even care to argue, you know? And it's like, actually, the argument is actually a pretty step forward from that. And I'm kind of trying to get the movement culture to get to that step of like, okay, let's argue about it at least. Let's talk. Yeah. But anyway, that was one thing that I was coming up with, a little acronym I call CAMP. So connections, angle, momentum, position. And the idea is like, say you're playing a guard passing game. Yeah, but you never started a jiu-jitsu match from guard, right? It came from standing. Someone pulled guard or someone got taken down. And it kind of leverages the differential learning research and just general research on variability of like, we can bring a hell of a lot of variation into this and make it more effective, more representative, have people explore wider parts of the solution space. So the idea with camp is like, each time you play the game, like, vary at least one of those things. They all change each other, but like, think of one of them, change it a little, explore something different. And I think what a lot of people don't understand yet, because they haven't dug deep enough into the research and certainly like the math of this stuff, is like I think the idea in the literature right now is the repetition without repetition, right? Like that's one of our kind of fundamental principles in ecological dynamics. And if you dig into the literature, the idea is that there's an optimal amount of variation, right? What I believe that comes from is not actually the applied research so much as the theoretical research of like the actual math of how attractors works in like nonlinear systems, where like you have an attractor and like there's a certain amount, say you have attractors. So for the people watching, imagine you have two wells, okay? And one of them's kind of deep and one of them's a lot deeper. And so you might have the ball is sitting in the shallower well, and you want it to get to the deeper well, which is kind of representing like the technical efficiency of a skill, let's say, right? There's a certain amount of noise that is optimal for getting the ball to the deeper well, right? If we have no noise, it stays in the shallower thing. It's harder to explore. Less exploration happens, less learning happens. If we have too much noise, the idea is, it might jump into that big well, but it's also going to jump right out, and who knows where it's going to go, right? So there mathematically should be an optimal amount of noise, and we can kind of calculate it. In grappling, though, I think where this like kind of becomes functional, my sense of this, and I'm curious to get your sense as well, is like, we can define the task, however, right? We can have a very constrained task or a wider task, whatever it may be. But if we're keeping with representative learning design for 99+% of everything we do, and we have this full resistance going on where, and again, like we were talking about, of like scaling the image and like keeping all these different parts of it, for the most part, everything's possible. There's an enormous amount of things everyone can do, right? There's an enormous amount of variation and complexity in that task that's kind of foundational to the resistance that we really, really want to have just about all the damn time. And that, to me, that seems to overwhelm any lack of variation that we may put in the start position or in the win condition of the task, where it's like, the idea is what amount of variability is going to overwhelm people? And we want to be under that. And I think certainly with start positions, you're not going to overwhelm people. It doesn't actually make it any more complicated. The only thing is just like if you say, okay, X guard, and the person's like, I don't know what X guard is, and you have to spend 10 seconds figuring out what X guard is, put the foot here before you start. But again, like they don't have to know what it is when they play it. They're kind of doing the same thing from a different spot and exploring differently. And anyway, so I know that's a lot, but I want to hear your take on that as well. Is that kind of consistent with how you're thinking about these transitions as well?
Yeah, I suppose the criticism I would have of a lot of people who are exploring this space is they're treating these areas as discrete from each other. So they'll do a standing task, they'll do a guard task, and they'll do a pin task. And they've covered everything. They've done all of jiu-jitsu and that.
Right.
But those things are all discrete from each other and are each distinct in and of themselves. So they don't attend to any of the information that leads in or lead out. Whereas my preference is to have the tasks go kind of following the same trajectory, but have each task lead into the other, so that we're actually linking our standing task to some sort of a guardy, pinny, tasky thing, so that they're not discrete things that only exist from this framework. It's how do we get into those frameworks? That is unbelievably important, in my opinion, that we actually learn to attend to all of that information that exists in those transition spaces. Moving from standing to guards, or from guards to pins, or from pins to submission attempts. That blurry bit, the mortar that holds the bricks together, is rich with information that if we don't set practice tasks that put us in those spaces, we don't learn to pick up on. We can't couple actions to those moments if we aren't put in those spaces. And yeah, it is definitely one of the criticisms I would have had, or would have, is having gone to a lot of different people's classes and seen a lot of people's practice tasks that they've designed and had people send me sessions. Overwhelmingly, we end up in a position that a lot of the practice tasks that they're doing are really good. There's a lot of thought and planning, and they understand the principles at play, but they exist in this space. There is a Polaroid picture with "this is guard" done. And then there's another practice task that this exists and it is pins, and never the two shall meet until open practice. And yeah, I think that's a huge, huge problem that really should be addressed. The longitudinal planning across a block of weeks while we're covering a subject should attend to that. And within the scope of a single session, I like to have at least a phase in and a phase out. What that phase in is can be pretty arbitrarily decided. It might be that today I've decided, for some reason, I'm going to let them pull guard. Ugh. I'll allow it once. That might be our entry into a guard engagement. It might then mean that the next time we're covering it, it might be we're going to look at ankle picks. What happens if somebody ankle picks us and we end up in a position as a guard? Can you exploit any of the emerging and decaying affordances in time to gain advantage in the guard passing phase? Have you got yourself to a position before they are able to establish an effective guard, before they're able to get into a position that they know there is a guard sequence coming, that you have already destroyed any opportunities they have to start playing guard? Yeah, I think that's so important. Really, really is.
Yeah. And I noticed when I first started training at a school that was using ecological dynamics, that with the people that were around my level, they were crushing me in all the discrete tasks. They were just beating me over and over in the tasks. And then when we do the free sparring with what would seem like all the tasks put together, I would win. And It was always in those transition points in between, because it was like in some way, because I had more like sparring experience. I've been grappling for a long time, but doing a lot of like drilling stuff because of traditional schools.
The drilling got you good at it. It was the drilling.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think that's absolutely missing. And so just to regurgitate that and hear your take on it. So are you saying, for instance, like you might have, because I think a lot of, just as an example, a lot of the way people set up games right now in jiu-jitsu is like, okay, you have a standing task, take down your partner, so you get them to hip on the floor or both hands on the floor. If they touch that, or if they stay there for 3 seconds, you win, start over. And then again, then we do the guard game. You start in the guard, now you try to pass the guard, right? And so as far as nesting the transition, or blurring that transition and working on that transition, which is clearly important, are you saying that, for instance, you would design a task where, okay, you do the standing thing, and then, okay, now we're starting from an ankle pick, but we're doing guard passing?
Yeah. So you would have a primary focus. The thing you are looking at is a discrete phase of play. It could be guard in general. So it might be guard passing, guard sweeping, whatever. Guard, we're looking at it for an amount of time. Let's arbitrarily say it's guard passing. I want to spend an amount of time getting my guys saturated in guard as it exists. I might show them a couple of things if they're new and don't have any options. We might play some games that explore precursors, destabilize on our opponent's base of support, getting hands or hips to the floor, the classics. That is the focus of our group for an amount of time. Anything that we do that is pinning, that is submissions, that is takedowns, exists in reference to the thing that we are looking at. So any stand-up thing I do, it leads into guardy stuff. Any pinny stuff, it comes from guardy stuff. Any submissions we're doing come from guardy stuff, right? So it's not just looking at guard, it's here's guard, here is this tool that we can use. It exists in this massive thing we call grappling. Go, explore it, right? I think that's the thing. So it's rather than having 3 things that we're looking at, our standing thing, our guardy thing, our pinny thing, our submissiony thing, it's this is the thing we are looking at. What happens here? What happens there? What comes from it? What leads into it? I think that's probably the more sensible way to go about doing it, purely because it lets us start to nest affordances. I can start to take advantage of those things that happen in a fraction of a second between this phase and this phase. Yeah. There's my rant.
Yeah, I mean, and those things are so important, right? Like, I think if you watch high level grappling, it's, I would almost make the argument, it feels like those transition points are where like so much, if not like most of the stuff is happening.
Yeah,
that like
absolutely.
especially in judo, like from the little bit I know and watch of it, man, when I watch the Olympics and see like some guy gets thrown, but he does this insane thing midair and somehow lands on his feet and pulls. Whoa!
I know.
That was insane.
I know, crazy.
Yeah, I think people will be really excited to like. I think people will intuitively understand this now that we're drawing some attention to it, and I think they'll be excited to start implementing it and have some really great results. But coming back to tasks for standing, so maybe I'll give you a specific example, and maybe I'll be a little. I'm doing the interview. I get to be selfish. All right.
Quite right.
So let's say, but I also think I'm sort of where a lot of people are. So it's not all that selfish. Where I'm pretty comfortable standing. So from day 0, I was like, I'm not going to be a guard puller. That's not going to be. That doesn't to me transfer to like other areas of sport or movement or self-defense. So I want to make a big effort to always stand up, right? So I developed some wrestling, some ability to not get thrown by judo players, and yet again, especially because of the like repetitions when I did do some judo, I have to date pretty much completely lacked most judo skills as far as foot sweeps, as far as throws, as far as like any sort of takedown other than like leg grabs or body locks. And so with someone like that, how are you going to approach building tasks to help them learn those, let's not say like those specific skills, but like the wider categories of those skills, like you were mentioning the turny backy blocky throws, and what are the other categories of those things that you look at?
Yeah, so I guess we've got. I've never actually sat down and tried to categorize them. I probably should at some point. But we've got throws where you turn your back and you're blocking your partner's legs and using your hands to rotate them over. We've got throws where you turn your back and you lift them and then rotate them over. You'd have throws where you're facing them and you're using your feet or legs to move their feet or legs out of place so that they can fall over. And then we have sacrifice throws. So I guess that's probably the four main families of things that exist. So as a general rule of thumb, we start building in practice tasks. We start leading them to those solution spaces just by creating games where the underlying success criteria is addressed rather than any kind of throw them to the floor stuff. So I'll do a quick plug while I'm here. There was a gentleman, Christian, who came over from America and recorded a session and he put it on YouTube that I coached that was all about foot sweeps. So if you are one of the people that is struggling with coaching standing stuff, it's on YouTube. If you just put Cal Jones Judo in, it'll probably come up. He had it on his private account and has deleted it from that and put it on a different one. So if you are sad enough to have bookmarked me, I imagine you're an insomniac and need help dropping off. But if you are one of those few people, it has changed, but it is on there if you want to see. Back to it. For something like a foot sweepy thing, we can do something where we are really exaggerating the specified information that we need to start picking up on. So if we just play a game of tug of war, where we're both gripped up to each other, and my job is to pull you to my side of the mat, your job is to pull me to your side of the mat. The position we end up in, for those of you that are watching, ends up really exaggerated in this sort of leant back posture, where each player is pulling really hard and their posture gets compromised. So their weight has shifted past their heels so that they can more maximally pull your weight their direction. That is an extremely exaggerated version of what we're looking for when we're trying to apply sweeps and reaps. Your center of mass has shifted behind your heels. This is the opportunity that I'm trying to pick up on to execute techniques to that direction. The next time we play that same game, you can score a point if you make me fall over. It's not overly complicated. It's a simple sport. It's just hard when they try and stop you, right? So we're both trying to pull each other to our side of the mat, but if I can use my feet to make you fall over, I score a point already. The issue there is that the way we are each behaving isn't especially representative of the practice environment. So we have made some compromise on the scale of representativeness to exaggerate the affordance we're trying to pick up on. We're really exaggerating that haptic feedback so that it's, ridiculously obvious. It's got a big bullhorn making noise. We are very much able to pick up on it. After that, we want to slide up the scale of representativeness. So we reduce the size of the signal, but they know where to look for it and what it is now. So we could play something, I think in the video I played game Landmines, because I have a sick sense of humour and thought it was an amusing name, where you're trying to make people step on some rubber spots on the floor. If they step on a spot, you get a point. But obviously, as I'm trying to pull you onto these things, you are constantly compromising your posture. You're stepping too long so you don't stand on a thing, or you're digging your foot in and pulling back so that I can't pull you my direction. That is much more accurate to the kind of specified information that we'd actually be dealing with in competition. If I'm trying to pull you towards me, it's likely you will resist that in some way. You might take a step, you might dig in to resist it. When you resist, there will be a moment that your center of mass will shift. Hopefully, very much. Probably not that much. We need to pick up on that moment so that we can time and execute our attacks. So, the same game, if they step on a spot, a point, but if you can sweep or reap from any point, you get yourself a point as well. Then we have the same problem that we had at the beginning. If the only thing I can do is sweeps, they will start to behave in a very unrepresentative way. So we just open up the practice task. If you can make them step on a spot, you score a point. If you can throw them with anything, you get a point. You get 10 if you can foot sweep them at any point. So now you're situating and contextualizing the thing they are trying to pick up on. The specified information is there. It's still been slightly exaggerated, but it's contextualized within all the other things they can do so that the player they are playing against has to show more accurate behaviors, right? And it's the same thing. So I'll give you an example of each. Why not? We've got time. If we're doing something like a sacrifice throw, so something like sumigeshis or tomonagis, stuff where I'm level changing underneath you so that my center of mass is below you, and it's basically a BJJ sweep, isn't it? It's almost a guard pull. Not quite, but almost. There's no shame in it. So the important bit for that, the thing that I think makes it more easy for us to be able to be successful, is getting our bum between their feet. So one of the big things that people do that make it really difficult for them to be successful is they fall away from their opponent, and then your belly button's here, their belly button's a mile away. For you to get any kind of lift is really challenging. For a degree of success, being underneath them just becomes easier, right? It's the same for a butterfly sweep. If I'm trying to butterfly sweep you and your belly button is a mile away from me, it's going to be very, very challenging. So we just play a game. If you can sit down between your partner's toes, you score a point. Really easy. Then we say if you can sit down between your partner's feet, but your foot is on them, you score more points. So that we can have the foot either in like the top of their leg, so it's ready for an Ushimaya, or it could be on the inside of their leg for a Sumigeshi, or we have some form of a placement of where we're placing our leg while we have sat underneath them so we can create this elevation and sweep them. Then you just build it into a game. So any throw scores you 1 point. If you can get to the position, you get a point. If you get to the position and flip them over, bottle of whiskey, and your dad will love you, right? We are just making it more attractive for them. This is it. And then turny backy lifty and turny backy blocky, we've discussed. We're either trying to turn and block the leg or trying to turn and lift them. I think for, let's say, 90% of all of the throws that exist in judo, we are doing one of those things. So we do have categories like drop seanagis or drop kakerumas, where we're doing the same thing as a sacrifice throw, but where I want my body facing is different. So for like a drop seanagi, I would want my knees to be on the floor between your toes, but facing away from you. If I'm facing you, it's a very different game. Yeah. Hopefully that makes sense, right? And then from those things, when we are able to pick up on what the kernel of information we're trying to get them to attune to is, where their opponent is putting their weight in space, and how we can coordinate ourselves to be able to lift, block, or trip, I suppose, we can then start to build in how these things work and how they are situated within the greater scope of all of the options available to you. Yeah, it's easy. They pay me for this.
and tell us more, because again, like I really feel like in the grappling ecological dynamics community, we are like starving for this. Like we need, like, we don't really know how to set up the games for these throws yet. And including myself, like, you know, I've been trying actually, and to go back to your little plug, one of my coaches, Sean Divney, he actually sent me your game on foot sweeps, that video,
Cool.
because I was talking to him about, like, man, I am having so much trouble coming up with good games for foot sweeps. I really want to teach people and learn myself how to do these damn foot sweeps. How can we do this? And he sent me your video, and I loved the whole approach. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. So I'll say it's worth a lot more than just getting people to sleep.
Well, thank you. Very kind of you to say so.
But
Uh,
any
yeah, sorry. Did you have an example of something that you were specifically struggling with? Because obviously it's an entire sport. There's so many different things to address. But if there's, so I guess there are things we can do to exaggerate specified information. So we can put people in positions that the positions they are in are exaggerated, which makes picking up on that information easier. So for the majority of throws or takedowns that we do, I don't really want to do them when you're in alignment, structurally sound, your center of mass is directly above your base of support. So I want to find a way of creating some sort of instability. I want to destroy that base of support if I can. So for the foot sweepy game, the build-up was all based on getting your partner into these positions so you can start to feel what that's like. There are other ways of doing that with other throws. Obviously, if I'm doing a turny backy lifty throw, I don't want your weight all the way back. Yeah. So one of the things we can do if I'm hoping to try and exaggerate that, we play a game, sometimes call it the floor is lava, because I'm a child, where there's the way we've got our mats configured. We have red mats on one half, well, 1/3, and greeny grey mats for the other 2/3. So we just have one player with their back to the red, one player facing them. Both players can score. Sorry, I'm blocking my face. Both players can score a point if they push the other person into the red. So I'm trying to push you in. Your back is to the red. You probably want to try and reverse the position so you can push me in. So at this point, your pushes are going to really exaggerate your posture forward. You can't walk backwards. So it's just exaggerating that thing, right? I'm making you compromise your weight because it makes it easier for me to pick up when your weight has shifted forward for me to time throws. Really, really useful, exaggerates it. And it has the advantage that it transfers directly, not just as a helping us throw, but controlling the space on a mat. In judo, if your opponent steps out, if they walk away from you and step out of the contest area, they are penalised. If they're penalised enough times, you just win. I can't push you out, but I can push you to the edge. If you are on the edge and I initiate an attack and you just walk away from me, penalty. And I don't mind winning from penalties. I'll win any way I possibly can. So there's a whole bunch of value in terms of the tactical situation of being able to control the mat. Really, really important. But because they have their back to the thing and they don't want to step out, they're either circling, which lets us learn how we can start to try and control their weight past their feet if they're going sideways, so we can create this breaker balance, or they're going to push us backwards, which then really compromises their weight forwards. So it's just exaggerating the thing that we're having to learn to pick up on, right? Another way we play the same thing is with just a game I call the pickup game, imaginative, I know, where you score a point if you pick your partner up. It's all you have to do. You pick them up, you get a point, and then we change the rule set so that if you pick them up, but your belly button is facing away from them, you get 5 points. So it means that for me to coordinate a lifting action where I've turned my back to you, I have to have made sure that your balance is broken. Otherwise, you can just pick me up. You can counter throw me really easily. So we start to coordinate break a balance because you are penalised when you don't. Your opponent will just pick you up and get easy points. So even if, as a coach, you don't say, maybe try and stop him picking you up, they still figure out. If they don't, if, they're a little dim, you can come along and explain. Why do you think he's able to stop you from lifting him every time? I don't know. Do you think it's because he's like this and you're bent over like a banana? Maybe try not to do that. Go play the game again. And lo and behold, they can coordinate it and they can get those breaker balances into their partner purely because of the way you've constrained the task is exaggerating those things, right? The thing they're trying to pick up on becomes slightly exaggerated and they can then start attuning to it more easily. I think if you can find what the kernel is at the heart of a move or a group of things you want them to explore, you can start to design practice tasks for it. It's the same as in groundwork, isn't it? If I'm designing X guard game. I just have to know what kind of things am I trying to do to the next guard. Trying to displace their weight, trying to stop them putting frames in, trying to stop them from putting structural supports down. I could make a game about that. Like, you don't have to be the greatest player on earth to go, don't let him put the hand on the floor when you're trying to make him fall over. Like, it really is an easy sport. It's only difficult when they try and stop him. Like,
right. One thing I just want to draw a little bit of attention to that I think is very brilliant about the way you're designing those games is, so you could have this thing, right, where you're like, okay, we want to exaggerate the specifying information. We can have the pulling man and pushing man, right? Sort of deals. So I want you to push into your partner, and then when they push into you, I want you to throw them, right? And what happens if you set it, again, it's like, that makes sense, right? But what I think would happen if you set it up that way is the person that you tell to push in is disincentivized to actually do that, right? That's going to make it harder for them to win. So you kind of have two situations where if they're actually trying to win, they're probably just going to kind of ignore that. They're going to be incentivized to ignore that and not do it, not actually exaggerate the specifying information. Or also potentially just as bad, they are trying to do it, so they focus on pushing into their partner, and in doing so, they're like kind of decoupling from all the information that they need to be attuning to, and also not moving in representative ways for their partner to actually attune to.
That's the big one.
And then now you've made the whole task much less productive, versus when you set it up this way where you're like, the floor is lava behind you. It's like, okay, now I have to win by not going back. You're incentivized to push in, but it's still in a representative task, right?
But yeah, exactly that, isn't it? I have to push in a way that I know you might try and throw me. You can still win from throwing me. There's danger in front of me and there's danger behind me. So I have to probably try and do the one where it's in front of me, because I might be able to overcome that danger. I can't survive lava.
Yeah. On that subject, actually, I with some friends in October last year, we flew out to Texas. Me and Josh Beam. We did a sumo tournament with no experience.
Oh, cool.
And it was so interesting for us because it's like, in sumo, it's so much about staying inside the ring. And so as much as it's like, it's about takedowns, but the definition of takedown is completely different, because you touch the floor and that's over, right? Mm-hmm. Or you touch the floor even with the top of your foot, it's over. And then also you go out of the ring, you also lose. And so now it really becomes about like, it becomes so dynamic and explosive, but there's so much of this like controlling the space that gets integrated into the sport. And then also it's like you could push the guy to the edge. And this happened in my first match and also my last match in my division. I like overwhelmed the guy with physicality, push him to the edge, and what does he do? He turns and throws me. And I'm like, whoa, like, where did that come from? Like,
yeah, you gave him your weight, right?
Yeah, like in such a way that they were oddly very good at that, especially like coming from a situation where like you've got almost no options. You're not only at the edge of the doyo, the ring, but there's momentum pushing you out and a big, strong guy pushing you as hard as he can, and you've got to throw me now. And they're still doing it. It was amazing and super interesting.
It's such a cool sport. Yeah, it's I think it's the grappling aficionado sport. Like, if you're sort of into grappling a bit, probably BJJ. If you're really into grappling, sumo. You have a monocle, a cigar, really enjoy it. It genuinely is. It's an awesome sport. To the point you were saying, though, the fact that the environmental constraint forces those breaker balances or highly encourages pushes that then create breaker balances. We use sumo type games all the time. It's a really common thing. So one of the things that we use is essentially to teach hand action. So you learn how you can push people or how you can absorb a push and rotate your partner through. So it's literally just a sumo ring, two people in, push them out. We just play sumo, but you can do the thing. And then we play 3-man sumo. So you end up in a position that you get sneak attack from different positions, but it means when there's more chaos going on. So once you've pushed two people out and you turn around, there will be somebody bull rushing you. They'll be coming at 1,000 miles an hour because they want to push you out before you're settled. And the over exaggeration of that push becomes really valuable for you learning how you can start to circle step and pull them through. And as soon as you can get that circle step and pull them through, you can start to coordinate throws off that. Something as simple as like some sort of ashiwaza where you're blocking their knee, like a Izaguruma, where they're giving you all of their momentum. It's Christmas. You just turn, put your foot out, and you look incredible. But they've thrown themselves. Like, you've just blocked their leg a bit. So that is another thing that we do loads of, because it just exaggerates that information that you need to learn to pick up on. It's not learning moves, it's learning movement. I think that's the big difference. We're not Pokemon trainers collecting moves. It's becoming well attuned to the performance environment that we're in.
Hell yeah. Great. So okay, so we've got some games to kind of develop I believe all of the foundational things for judo. But now the next question or the next direction for that, there's going to be a lot of us where we're going to be like, Cal's got, this is the formula. We're going to run those games to the ground, right? And so what comes next, right? So say, for instance, like the foot sweeps sequence, but any and all of the other ones. So when you run it the first time, you can set it up that way, right? Where you're building it up from this very constrained, less representative, super exaggerated affordances, specifying information, and dialing it towards full representativeness or close to it. Say you had the same people. Next session that you want to work that again. I assume you're not running the same session. How are you changing that? If you're changing that.
Yeah, so I suppose mainly there's a flow through, right? So that the progression of each of the tasks we do ends up sliding. It's not always the case, but overwhelmingly it is more frequently than not. It goes from a less representative task that exaggerates specified information, and we funnel in to more representative tasks that have that it's harder for you to pick up on that information. So there's more signal, more like other variables going on that you're trying to sift through to pick out the thing you want. But again, the fact that we contextualize all of the stuff we're doing within the greater whole of the game makes doing a progression really easy, because you can do precursor task. We could start looking at options that we could then start solidifying that as a throw rather than just attending to the information. How do we get them to the floor once you've picked up on their pushes? Then it's, how do we do this against a partner that is moving more accurately? So we've got other options to throw. And then it's, what do we do once we've been successful with this throw? Then it's, how do we get to a position that we can get to hit? So a lot of the time it'll build into like kumikata phase, gripping, and how we can take advantage in those moments. So again, another little bugbear of mine. Nobody pays any attention to the kumikata phase and grabbing each other. And it has so many affordances baked in. One of my favorite things to do is to have my gi really baggy and offer forward my collar for them to grip. The second they reach forward with their right hand, as a right-handed player, they can't stop me throwing. They offer me an arm. They're not controlling any of my shoulders. I can take a grip on it and attempt to throw for free. They have nothing that can stop my rotation. Overwhelmingly, every single level, I've had nobody in the whole time I'd competed attend to the fact that they just mindlessly put their hands on. The Americans had quite a big focus on kumikata for a while. Jimmy Pedro, senior and junior, both had like a delineated do this then that kind of thing for gripping, which didn't speak to me in its formulaicness, but the underpinning principles are so important. If I put my hand, what would be my power hand? So if you're in a gi and you have your right foot forward, if you put your right hand on their collar, you have just made a huge, huge, huge mistake. You're giving them free reign of attacking you with nothing to be able to defend. If you're a right-handed player against a right-handed player, you need to control the sleeve side first. If I'm holding your sleeve, you can't throw me. It's not possible for you to do a throw unless you try a left-handed attack. I want to take hold of your sleeve and then build my other hand on. Then if you try and turn in, I have some control on you to be able to try and stymie your attacks. Segue, I know, but it annoys me. I apologise. So we might do something that is looking at the kumikata that builds into being more maximally placed to execute the move that we're looking at. How can I lead you into a position that before you have hands on me, it's easier for me to throw you? What leads in, what leads out, and we explore that space. So we have a whole bunch of throw them on the floor, make them say ow or pin them. If you can do this move, you get 1,000 points. So it's really contextualizing the skill they're looking for within the whole gamut of options available to them. But yeah, 4 weeks you can edge it out for that. Maybe 3 if we're going great guns.
This is super great, and I think I'm starting to feel more confident about my understanding of how to build and certainly use some of these games for judo sort of tasks. But again, I've got you here. I want to pick your brain as much as possible and see where you've been doing this for decades, longer, not only decades, but decades more than I have, which is awesome. And so I'm curious to just try to get into the depth of where is your understanding different from mine. And so, for instance, and then the viewers will appreciate, because I think the more they hear from you, the more they'll understand. So, for instance, with those gripping sequences, right, where you're okay, you're a right-handed player, you probably don't want to do this, right? Or that's probably not the first thing you want to do, right versus right. So traditional approach, we teach, here's a sequence, maybe it's, here's a sequence you don't do, and here's a sequence you do, and let's do 100,000 reps, right? How would you approach teaching that through tasks?
Yeah.
Or teaching that functional concept underneath that through tasks?
Yeah, so I'm explicit in explaining why the types of grip we take are important, what the affordances it gives and the reasons we do or don't want to take certain grips at certain times. So they are cognitively aware of what's going on. And then I will shape practice tasks that really encourage them to do more beneficial gripping patterns. So one of the games we'll play is quick grip. So I think I mentioned it before, but this version has, you have to throw within those seconds. So you've got 5 seconds to throw. If you haven't thrown in that time, we disengage and we go from start and re-engage. So if you are offering me a sleeve and I have 5 seconds to throw you, I am very, very quickly going to figure out how the hell I can smash people with poor grips really quickly. So you then become much more placed and purposeful in where you put your hands. You're attending to the fact, if I'm careless with where I place my hands, I'm probably going to pick up some air miles. And the same thing, you learn how you can start to gain advantage. So something as simple as a pocket grip. So if I'm a right-handed player against a right-handed player and they get their hand on my sleeve first, so they are controlling this must be awful if you don't have a video camera, I apologize. If they are holding the sleeve I want to put on their collar, at this point, if I can't get it placed because they're defending my hand really well, if I don't put my other hand on them, I am doomed because I have nothing stopping them. If I just hold onto their sleeve, I've capitulated. I've got two awful grips. I've just got two sleeves. There's like a few things I can do from there, but their level of control on my sleeve is really high. So they have such a huge advantage. I need to be able to stop them rotating to throw me. So the thing that is probably the most sort of beneficial thing, the thing that most people fall to, is taking a grip. With your left hand, instead of being on the sleeve, you grip their collar or their armpit. So like rolling into their shoulder here. So if they try and turn, I can just frame on that shoulder. You have hold of my sleeve, you have hold of my collar, you are in a position that you have won the gripping game. I don't have a sleeve and a collar, I am a one-handed man, but I can put this on your lapel and prevent all of this rotation, which then buys me a bit of time to try and get my other hand placed. I can try and break grip, or I can, if I'm incredibly talented, do left-handed throws with a left-handed grip, or right-handed throws that work off a left-handed grip, which is my preferred solution. Back to, would I say that a good player needs to learn a Seoinage? No. I don't think an elite player needs to attack left-handed. I think you can just be one-sided. With the caveat that you can solve problems right-handed that a left-handed solution would be there, right? So if I've got a left-handed grip and I do a reverse Seoinage, fine, not a problem. It's a right-handed throw with a left-handed grip. I am solving the problem of being left-sided grip, but I can still do a thing. Yeah, that. But yeah, there's loads of instances like this that where we place our hands and when leads to advantage and disadvantage. If we've lost the grip game, if they have two hands on and we have one hand on, we don't want to just capitulate and I'll just hold both sleeves then, because you'll lose. Like, it doesn't matter if you're equally matched and they have won the kumikata phase, you've lost. You won't win. It's how America have won medals. No shade meant. Their judo's fine, they're competent players, but they won their medals because overwhelmingly they were better kumikata players than the people they were fighting. They were better at taking grips. So when these Japanese players with their gorgeous stand-up judo came out, they were just being grubbed out by this really strategic, well-placed gripping strategy that gave them a huge disadvantage from the off and gave the player who maybe not as proficient, like technically, traditionally, a huge advantage. So yeah, kumikata, pay attention. I think that's important.
This is gold. This is so great. So, okay, we have quick grip. You're making the grips. You got 5 seconds, and then you got to change it. And you got quick grip. You've got 5 seconds, and you have to throw with the grip, or you have to reset. Give us some more gold here, Cal. What else we got?
Oh, crikey. The kumikata phase. Oh, we do. So we do quite a lot of stuff that builds on effectivities. So the quality of grips that you have is really contingent on your capacity to maintain them. If I've won a gripping exchange, the person that I have gripped is going to try and get my hands off them. If you don't have granite forearms, you will come undone. So a lot of the stuff that we do around gripping is based on building effectivities. So we can kind of ignore perception action coupling, we can ignore a bunch of the stuff, but we play quite a lot of games that we play, I can't remember what I call it. I just throw the belts out and they know and groan. Essentially, each person has a belt in each of their hands. So I have the end of one belt in one hand, the end of one belt in the other, and my opponent has the other ends of those belts. And you just have to try and pull the belt out of your partner's hands. The sheer, unadulterated level of agony in your forearms after playing that game for a while is just through the roof. And because you're gripping cloth, the transfer is really, really high. It's a really useful way of getting this gripping strength done. We play a game called Lord of the Rings. Again, I'm a child, where you're gripped with the people next to you. So we form a ring, and I hold the sleeve of the person either side of me. That makes sense, yeah. the purpose of the game is just to practice some sweeps. So we're just coordinating how sweeps work and how, once we have moved their leg, how do we get them to the floor? Because a lot of times people move the foot and do bugger all with their arms. So it's a game that we use for that, where you're just trying to sweep people next to you, move their feet forward and anchor your hands. But once you've done the little rope battles with the belts, when you go into that, again, your forearms are just on fire. So it's a double-edged thing. That there is some perception coupling in how we coordinate what we do once we've moved their foot, but it's just punishment. There's a little bit of me that likes hurting people still, and I don't really get to compete very much. So it's design practice tasks that have them grown. That always makes me happy.
I think if you're a coach of athletes in any sport, at some point you gotta learn to enjoy a little bit. Like you're gonna have to make the athletes do some hard things here.
Yeah, they've got to kill to failure. Sometimes it has to happen, right?
So the belt tasks you're describing, just specifically, are those like two different belts? So like I'm holding my own belt, you're holding your belt, and they're kind of they're looped through each other?
No. So if we each took our belt off, I'm going to hold one end of my belt and one end of your belt. So there are two straight belts between us. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The important thing is that we're both pulling away the whole time. So the belts have to be under tension. If the belt's loose, it is no longer a particularly challenging task. It doesn't hurt your arms at all. There's no effectivities being built. But it also means that the capacity to pull the rope out of their hands is really reduced. Like if there's 15 foot of rope and you're doing this, it's not really going to do a lot. But if you're really taut, if the belt is constantly under tension, then you can really start to fray their forearms. It's a personal favorite of mine.
Oh, that's going to cause some suffering for me. I can feel it already. Speaking of the kind of gi and lapel and gripping like this, how does no gi change this?
Yeah, it's a really interesting distinction, honestly. So we've had a bunch of guys that have done only no gi with us and then have gone in to try the gi. We've had a bunch of guys that have only done the gi and have gone to try no gi. And I think that the transition between no gi to gi is easier in that you've already learned how to deal without massive handles, right? I've got these huge handles that make life easy. If I can do a hip throw on you when you're sweating buckets and I don't have cloth to grip, it's probably going to be a bit easier when there's no cloth to grip. But I've incredibly anecdotal. It's a study of one. The guys that have come from judo into the no-gi tend to be a bit crisper in how they execute those throws. So I think that there might be some advantage to having made it easy mode. The grips that I have make turning in really, really simple, or it's a lot less difficult to be successful. So I've had more opportunities of coordinating those actions successfully. That when you take the gi away, they struggle because they can't grip for an amount of time. But once they figure out how to coordinate, actually, I can just replace a collar with a whizzer grip. I can just change my sleeve grip to just cupping behind their elbow and pinning it. Once they start to figure out connections, I think because they've had more opportunities of being successful in that area, their transfer rate seems a bit higher. Whereas the no-gi guys, initially more successful in the transition, but they're a bit grubby. They're not as pretty in how they perform stuff. So even when they are given the extra handles and all of the stuff that makes life a lot easier, they don't take it. They just still do grindy, grubby stuff. But again, that might literally just be that the people that are more attracted to no-gi are more likely to be that kind of character. If you think, I want to put on pajamas and wrestle people, you're probably a little bit more refined. You're a pipe and slippers kind of guy. Whereas if you're turning up in lycra pants and an OnlyFans rash guard, you're probably more likely to be a grindy grappler, right?
Who is that about, Cal? I don't know who you're. Just kidding.
Oh dear. Yeah, but so in terms of coaching it, I think that the skill sets, it's almost identical with a gi or without a gi to sort of confer those skills into people, to add those skills to people's repertoires. The only difference is the connections they make things a little bit easier to achieve and a little bit harder to achieve. But the variables that they have to attend to, how they can displace weight, how they can fit in, all of those things are really, really similar. Yeah, I think if you can grubby in your lycra wrestle people, you'll be fine in the pajamas and vice versa.
So, for instance, with let's say nogi judo, let's call it that. Um, could you do exactly those same quick grip games? Would you change those at all?
Yeah, so we've used it before, but it's more curtailed. You know, something like a collar tie is you have less variability of grips. Is the big thing. So I'd be less likely to hang out with this passively. If you have a collar tie on your opponent, you're really having to work hard to maintain it. So we don't really do quick grip as frequently. We do attack quick grip. So you've got a certain amount of time to be able to be proactive with it. Because a lot of the time, once you've secured an advantageous position, you don't want to just hang out there. It's usually a mistake. So we do. But yeah. We also, most of the rule sets we do are just BJJ rules, pretty much. But my background's judo stuff, so I always feel a bit awkward calling it BJJ, so I just use grappling. I don't care if it's folk style catch as catch can, if it's Greco-Roman, as long as we're throwing people on the floor and ideally making them say ow. It's the same thing.
Yeah,
Unless
yeah.
you're
I try to.
Brazilian, that is, and then you invented the sport. It's, yeah.
Yeah, I try to also use the word grappling kind of as much as I can because it really is like, especially I think there's an interesting thing with ecological dynamics of like what happens now. Okay, this is judo. Okay, this is Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Okay, this is Japanese jiu-jitsu, right? Like, and it's like kind of the moves are the historical part. Like that's a lot of where things are passed down. I think I've got it here in Darren Warner's book, Skill Acquisition for Judo. Um, he talks about like the value of kata and his. I love your little reaction there. I caught that, and I agree. I agree. But when he talks about the value of judo, he doesn't even try to argue for the skill development side of that. He seems to just like kind of like let's not. He's like, look, it's probably not a skill development thing, but like there's a historical tradition to it. And look, like you were saying about like the hobbies, he's like, yeah, like
Yeah, you do you.
some people want to do uh maybe they don't have so much of a competitive interest and what they want to do is practice these movements and that may have a sort of meditation like esque to them that maybe a dynamic judo match or training or grappling training or all these CLA tasks with resistance, it's too dynamic for them and they want to have the nice peaceful aikido style movement practice with repetitions. As far as like not competing, he kind of makes a point of like, yeah, there's a traditional aspect to it. That's fine, right? but
Yeah.
but but yeah, like as far as when we move towards the CLA and using ecological dynamics and move away from teaching these same moves, there comes a question of like, is this still Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? Is this still judo?
Yeah, it's just a rule set, right? That's the only difference. So judo and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu are the same sport. So I don't need to bore you with the history of it, right? We know Madara went over. We know that he was just teaching them judo and bits of catch wrestling from folk style WWF wrestling stuff, right? They had like the prize fight and things going on. But he just taught them judo. It was at a time that it was called Kano Jiu-Jitsu. So they were calling it Jiu-Jitsu because it's before it was termed judo. But it is just Brazilian judo. The fact that the rule set developed separately so that there is more of a bias towards the groundwork has just changed some of the development. Like, but these things exist in judo. Like De La Riva guard is documented in like the 1890s. It's not a new thing. It is a thing that has been done. So if the rule set is a IBJJF rule set, then it's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. If those exact same grapplers went and entered the Catchers Catch Can World Championships, they'd have the same skill sets, they'd have the same repertoire of moves available to them, they'd have the same win conditions, but they'd then be doing catch wrestling. And then if they went into a judo match, they have the same skills, they have the same moves available to them, but now they are doing judo. Shut up. It's just grappling. It's wrestling in and out of pajamas. Sometimes it's submission wrestling, sometimes it's not. It's the oldest thing that humans have done. Wrestling each other probably came before running with each other, right? The first people that were scrubbling about on the savannah wrestled with each other. A majority of different animal species play fight and wrestle as part of their development. There's a paper that I've lost the reference to, annoyingly, because it's beautiful. It looked at the longevity of bears, and they had been able to really closely correlate the time at which bears stopped playing in childhood and the length of life they had. So the longer they played as an infant, the longer they survived in the wild. And correlation doesn't equal causation, but it was quite a compelling argument. And I thought, yeah, it makes a fair bit of sense. So if we can accept that bears aren't doing BJJ, they're just wrestling about with each other, we can probably say that we're not doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. We're grappling. There you go. That was another rant. Oh, this is fun.
I love the rants. Yeah, bring them all.
Yeah, no, it just baffles me. It's such a strange thing. Like, we end up with so many different wrestling traditions all across the globe. Like, we had a guy that joined our club recently who was from, I think he's Nigerian, and he had done no official grappling. He turned up and said, "Oh, have you done any stuff before? Have you trained anywhere?" He said, "No." And he came on and was phenomenally good, really good at wrestling. He was like, "Oh yeah, we just wrestle loads in my village when I was in Nigeria." And you're like, yeah, that counts. Like, it's not some sort of super secret thing that we're doing over here that is from a mystical scroll that means it's more worthy than just wrestling about when you were in a village in Nigeria, right? You've developed a bunch of skill sets that are identical to the skill sets you need to win under these rule sets that we're currently calling BJJ. Sorry. Apparently, this is a bug in my body. I didn't realize.
I'm loving it. Yeah, and from a movement perspective, like, this is where it's like, man, the CLA gets even more valuable because, like, we're so concerned with transfer, right? Like, just imagine, like, how hard it is to just get good at judo, right? And now imagine you have to get good at judo and everything else, literally everything else. It's like, it's so completely impossible, but it's just we try our best, right? But then with that width of all these different things that you could be doing and all these different informational variables and things that we could attune to that are important, and different movement synergies for completely different intentions and completely different environments, yes, with completely different people, the transfer that we get from doing one practice to another practice becomes just so exponentially more valuable. And this is the thing that I love so much about the CLA and ecological dynamics is, I think from the research, it's already somewhat clear. I think the more that is done, the more it'll show even a much larger effect because, again, all of the studies I've read so far, which is quite a few, they're testing the CLA in pretty, like, very specific ways and generally, like, decomposed tasks. and it's still winning, right? So
Yeah. It's one of the big contentions with the literature in general is a lot of it lacks validity ecological validity in that the tasks are looking at like decomposed finger oscillation tasks and like okay. Whereas like we had Egon Brunswick talk about this, is it 50s? I should probably remember, I've referenced the man too many times. But if we're doing a test and the test isn't testing the thing that it's supposed to test, it's testing something that looks a little bit like it, then it probably lacks ecological validity. So if we want to test, does this type of training help people in a sporting context, the study should be looking at sporting contexts. I think we're blessed that the fact that we accept ecological validity is a thing, it's the underpinning for representative learning design, means the studies that are designed to test a constraints-led approach are usually looking to attend to that as a factor. It's something that they are aware of, that it's not this decoupled, isolated thing that we can then draw conclusions from. They do try and situate it as best they can, but to do so is tough. It's this, how do we isolate factors? How can we... Yeah, it's pain, especially when you try and have like controls put in place. From my initial thing I wanted to do for my master's was looking at doing a study, doing a CLA versus traditional approach, and I approached a traditional approach coach and said, "Oh, I'm hoping to do a study. Do you mind if I use your group?" And he was like, "Yeah, that's fine. That'd be great." And then the second I left, he blocked and deleted me from Facebook. I'm like, "Oh, okay. You might have been the one that came out favorably here. It might be showing that what I'm doing is shit." So yeah, there's a lot of difficulties trying to get traditional approach coaches to go along with studies that might make them not look great, apparently.
it's really interesting. I had a very I'm trying to actually we're trying to do this at Groundworks. And the reason for that is I had posted something a while ago responding to a jiu-jitsu athlete that was sort of, he was like, ecological dynamics is BS. And he gave, a few reasons why, and I had a response. And in the comments, like there were, I've never had so many like engaged comments on an Instagram video. But there were a lot of people in the comments just, arguing as they do, right? The resistance we were talking about. And one of them was from a black belt gym owner in Florida. And so he said he had this like interesting kind of question comment. He said, if we have two new students, we put them in cross ashi, which is a favorable leg lock position for people that don't know. And you teach them with the CLA and I teach them with prescriptive instruction, and then they roll. Who do you think is going to win? I said, what? Like, dude, like, do you think I would have made this video if I didn't think the CLA guy is going to win? Like, of course I think this. Like, and, but I was like, like, yeah, you guys are all saying, like, none of these studies have been done in jiu-jitsu. And, like, I personally feel that we go where the weight of the literature is pointing us until the weight of the literature points us in a different direction, or a theory based on another body of literature that's even stronger points us in a different direction. And yet, you're also right that we haven't tested it in grappling specific sports, as far as I know. I haven't been able to dig up any studies myself. If you have, please send them my way.
Yeah. Strange, like our sport's magic. All the other sports, yeah. They're different to our sport. Our sport's magic.
You think everyone else isn't saying the same? They're all saying the same thing. That everyone thinks their sport is special.
Yeah. I know.
But I was like, dude, of course I'm gonna say this. I think this, but let's test it. Like, I'll come out to your gym. We'll try it. Let's see what happens. And he just kind of
radio silent.
Replying. I was like, I'm like, to me, it's so interesting because it's like, if you really want to argue against this, if you really believe your approach is better, let's test it. Yeah. And let's find out. Because let's be honest, we think it will happen based on a lot of evidence, but we don't know for sure, right?
Yeah,
It's
it's
like,
it's such difficult again. So I'm pretty glad the guy like did ghost me because it would have been fine for like just a thesis, like, but I think publishing it would have been difficult because you end up with there's a lack of control based on the quality of the coach. So it might be that guy is really personable. He has masses of buy-in. The rest of the people in the room are amazing. There's loads of factors that mean when he does really aggressive shit coaching, the guys still become quite competent because of all these other things. And it might be that I am dog shit. Like, I'm trying to do CLA, but I'm not great at what I'm doing. The guys that turn up are just ignoring me because I don't have command of the room. So adjusting for that, you just have to have so many numbers and so many different coaches that just in the wash, it rubs out all of those variables. It has to be a big enough study to just equalize for all that shit. That it's so difficult to do. It really is. Like, it's not that people don't want to get these things published. It's that it's just really, really challenging. Like, what kind of value, what kind of p-value would it have to be a viable study that actually has any weight to it? I imagine it'd have to be a whole bunch of people. Yeah. Very annoying, though. It would be, and regardless of whether you published it or not, it'd be very satisfying to turn up and, hey, here's our beginners. Enjoy.
yeah,
Because
yeah,
we know how that would go, right?
yeah. I mean, the guys at Groundwork, shout out to them, are so amazing. So they're using Eco as well, but one of the coaches there, Sean Dibney, he's kind of volunteered to be the traditional guy for a little experiment, and we're gonna try to run a little like just a little pilot thing, one session. We'll test it on a specific scenario, and like let's get some data and like see how it plays out. Because like yeah, we always have these other variables, but my suspicion is that the shittiest application of the CLA and ecological dynamics will still be significantly better than an extremely good application of the traditional approach, particularly if in an actual study design, we're throwing out the sparring randori section. It's just drilling versus just CLA. Let's make that clear. I think that's a huge difference.
Oh yeah,
You know?
they'd be stuffed, absolutely, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
There's no amount of learning dance moves that help you fight. It's true.
something I know quite well.
Yeah, it's just not the case, you know. It looks impressive. Like Jackie Chan looks amazing. But he's not kicking teapots at people's heads if you try and jump him in the street. It's just not happening. Like yeah. Very strange.
Amazing. Let's see what else I have here for you. Do you ever? So we mentioned a little bit like this thing of like someone gets both sleeve grips, right? If they get both your sleeves, maybe you're in a bad place, or certainly if they get your lapel and you don't have their lapel, you're in a bad place. Um, to what extent do you use tasks where it's like, okay, we're gonna start there in that situation?
Yeah, not often really. It's the same. It's the problem of finding a bunch of sheep at the bottom of a cliff, right? You don't worry about the sheep at the bottom. You look at the top of the cliff and see if there's a fence that needs mending. Like, we're in a position that if I end up in these positions, something has gone drastically wrong before here. I don't want people that are really good at solving this problem. I want people that are really good at solving that problem. I want people building fences at the top of cliffs, not people picking up sheep and burying them, right? I think that's that's the analogy in my head. So it's not very frequent at all, but we do a whole bunch of stuff that is trying to get them to not end up in those positions. It's the same with like escapes. When people are asking, "How do I get out of here?" It's such a cliche, but it's don't get caught there. Like don't be there in the first place. That's kind of the skill we want you to develop, rather than being, you're really good at solving problems that you have put yourself in. We want you to not put yourself in those problems. So, not that learning escapes is a futile attempt, a futile thing, because you will end up there fairly frequently, especially if you're not very good. But if you can prevent them getting you to those really poor positions, that all of the advantages with them, like you've got an Americana locked in from side control, and somebody says, "Oh, how do I escape?" Mate, that's not your number one concern. It's just not the issue at the minute. I think we end up in that position for something like that. Yeah.
How much do you like? I mean, this is almost the sort of same question, but I'll just say it because you gave a good answer to that. And I'm curious if you'll give the same answer to this. But like, for me, let's say this. In grappling, I have really gravitated towards, I really like giving some tasks that you're starting from an extremely advantageous position, especially for beginners. And my thought process with that is very similar to yours with we're exaggerating the specifying information, right? Like it's really easy to find the specifying information for extending someone's arm when you're already in the armbar, right? And also, as far as Bernstein's problem, okay, we've got all these degrees of freedom. This is hard. How are we gonna like build these synergies to, have this functional variability to create the task outcome we want? I think it makes sense to, and I'm very open to you pushing back against this, but I think it makes sense to start people, especially beginners, in those end positions where there's not really that many degrees of freedom anyway, right? Like maybe we start, you're already, I don't actually do this too much, but just for the sake of argument, maybe you start with already the armbar and like already your hands are separated, right? There's not that much that's going to happen from there that's like too wild, like you're pretty much going to get that armbar. And because of that, I think that makes the affordance for the armbar really obvious for beginners and the coordination for it easy to organize. And then I feel that, given that you could have now that that affordance is they're aware of it, they know it's there, there's some coordination that's been starting to build, and you can now put them somewhere else and they're going to more easily find their way to that. So the analogy I might give to Judo, and this is where you're going to probably say this is like absolutely ridiculous. I would never do that, but I want to hear it anyway. For instance, what if you had a beginner? You say, let's put you in the kind of almost end position of an Uchimata, ready, go, try to throw your opponent, right? And try not to land, don't hurt the guy, try not to land on them, but like you should be able to throw them from here, ready, go, try it. Is that ridiculous? What do you think of that? How would you push back against that? What would you do different? Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, so I agree mostly with what you said. I think you pretty much nailed stuff that most people probably are doing. We're going to start in the 10th planet guy called Spiderweb. Ridiculous names. And then just try to straighten an arm. That is a really important skill. Getting to there is a really important skill, but being competent from there is a thing we need to be good at. And for this poor sucker, can they find a way of making it difficult? Can they maximize their grips? Can they find ways of creating space? It's an important thing. So starting at the end, do all the time. For something like an Uchimata or a throw, starting at the end is really difficult, purely because you'd have to be balancing somebody on your back on one leg. So it's like just the like practicalities
like
of
transition thing we were talking about.
Yeah. The practicalities of starting in that position are difficult, but the So inverse of it is to just have them do a couple of the throws unopposed. So you're basically learning the coordination structure. So it is a thing I do. Absolutely. You're basically starting at the end. This is what the throw looks like. Just can you coordinate all of these bits to do a thing? Can you lift them up and plump them on the floor? Beautiful. Now we're going to actually learn this skill of how the hell do you get there? And when you do get there, how the hell do you do it when they're trying to stop you? So I think that is more analogous to we're starting in the position and looking to finish, is what some people would erroneously refer to as drilling. It'd be do a couple of repetitions of the move while your partner's not trying to stop you. We're reducing the complexity, but the specified information is still move this body through space using these things. There's still enough for you to be able to pick up on to coordinate an action. The degree of representativeness is low because they wouldn't stand like a melon while you throw them. So we very quickly slide up the scale of representativeness and contextualize it. So not drilling. It's not drilling, but it is looking at a move in isolation. Yeah. So yeah, we do that.
I want to maybe get on my soapbox for a second and now say the ecological approach is a perspective, not a tool. And so in this approach, Kyle, what you're saying is you maybe like we could call that a drill. Like some people might call that a drill, right?
Don't you dare. Some people could erroneously call that a drill.
Yeah. But listen, that 30 seconds, that minute, you're having them try the 3 reps. They could say that's it. Oh, he's drilling, right? There's no resistance there, right? But that's still an ecological dynamics approach. Why? Because it's coming from a perspective of ecological dynamics, of what skill is, of the symmetry between the performer and the environment, of how coordination happens, of there is no general motor program, of where are we on the representative design spectrum, and we know we're way down on this end and we got to get back up there quick. We don't want to spend all our time here because we don't think we're reinforcing these general motor programs and storing them anywhere. We don't think they exist, right? And again, it's like with the people that say they're I think right now the status quo is like, okay, we know about ecological dynamics, but we're kind of all using that because we use the constraints-led approach. We use, and all that is tasks, right? So we already use tasks and we already use drilling, and that's actually the better way to do it because we need both, right? But it's not an ecological dynamics approach because it's coming from the perspective of the traditional approach, which is that you store the motor programs in the brain, that you're all the things that you're perceiving, information that is fundamentally corrupted, it's not fundamentally good, and it needs to be fixed with these mental representations.
Don't stop.
It's coming from. I know you. Now I'm preaching to the choir here.
My neck's sore from nodding.
Right, but there's all these things that underpin the traditional approach that traditional coaches are basing their stuff on, whether they're deeply aware of it or they're not, right? And it's like, it's not really about how much are we doing the drills and how much are we doing the tasks. It's about kind of what perspective are we coming at this from? We're shifting that perspective. And because we're coming from this new perspective, not for fun, but based on a lot of evidence, that it makes so much more sense to design practice in these different ways. That's my.
Yeah, no, it's so true. Like they're trees that are in different fields. It's literally a completely different reason that you're using the tool. Like it's not to say that drilling is necessarily a bad tool. It's the reason you would use a drill isn't for the acquisition of a general motor program that can then be parameterized and deployed based on blah. That's not why we think a drill might be used. I might use one because somebody's just come back from having broken their leg and it's their first time on and they're really, really nervous about being thrown about for the first time. So we might have them do a couple of unopposed, just get used to finding the floor again. Maybe. I probably wouldn't, because I'm evil. But a nicer man might, right? If I'm doing something where somebody is doing an unopposed version of a move, it is almost exclusively to shape and I direct their search space to find ways of coordinating themselves based on the specified information of their opponent's body. The thing they are attuning to is still present. They're having to coordinate based on this and find a solution. The solution they find will not be that good when this person isn't this man. When he starts actually moving and trying to throw me back, that solution will be inadequate, but they will have some grounding and some understanding of ways they can move their body to lift a human being up. It's not building a GMP. It's not trying to groove in a move. It's not muscle memory. We're not doing dead reps so that we can automatize the motion and fire off those myelinated neurons more quickly. That's not what's happening. That's not why we're doing it. Shame on all of you. We are not drilling. It is contextualizing the thing so that we can shape our search space and then apply it in more representative areas. I agree. I had to join in. Solidarity.
Success. Amazing. Amazing.
Do me.
Okay. I think I think we've covered a lot of really important stuff.
Perfect. It's approaching my bedtime, so that's
Yeah. You're a trooper here. I know it's much later over there. Um, Really quick question. So those few reps, the waggle, what a good one looks like. Here's what it looks like. Try a few. How often do you do that? Is that like
fairly frequently. So it's a useful thing to demarcate the start of a block. So today we are going to be looking at hip throws. Here are a couple of hip throws. Go do a couple with your partner. Cool. Sometimes it precedes a game and sometimes it follows it, succeeds, I suppose it would be. So I might have them play some sort of a game where they're looking to try and get rotation and lift in before we show them here is a version of it. If it is a mat that is full of guys that have been coming for a decade, then I wouldn't have to. Like it's fine. But I don't bother with a beginner's class and a normal class. Just everybody trains on the same mat. So we frequently end up with beginners on the mat. So having a moment that you can, here's the thing, is really useful. So until they've been coming for, I don't know, let's say 2 years, they've probably not been in a position that they've experienced every throw that exists that has a name in judo. So there might be some slight variations on how you're lifting and how you create rotation. So just introducing it for less than 3 minutes of a practice task, I think, is useful time, really. And it also has the advantage that they are aware, being thrown that way, of what their body's going to be going through. So I think it prepares them for moments a little bit more as well. Yeah, so
100%.
a lot, fairly frequently.
Mm-hmm. How do you change things for more advanced practitioners? How do you think about that?
Yeah, so I suppose the big thing is we're mostly a recreational club. So the guys that train with me, we don't compete often, really. Maybe once or twice a year. So when it gets closer to the time, we start to become more focused in on stuff that leads to a higher chance of success against the people they will be fighting. So depending on the belt they are, if they are competing but they're a Q grade, so they're not a black belt yet. Oh, I made a proper face there. Not a black belt yet. Not sneering at them. Those guys are probably in a position that the type of judo they will be doing will be much more aggressive. It'll be a lot of wait for them to be shit and you'll win a medal. If you want a medal, this is how you do it. It's really easy. They'll be bad. Counter throw them. You win. If it's at a black belt level, if you've got people that are competing at an elite national level, you want them to medal at that point. Then knowing the type of players they'll be fighting is really useful. So it's one of the advantages that, again, people that aren't in the arse end of nowhere in North Wales have over us is they're a lot closer to other clubs to be able to cross train. So we don't really have any judo clubs by me. So the majority of guys that we ever get to train against the BJJ guys, and there's not many good BJJ places by us. No shots fired. In fact, I think there is a decent one that's about half an hour away. So I'll have to pop in and find them. But either which way, we're in a position that we don't get the opportunity to train with people that aren't consistent training partners. So that's difficult. If you are coming closer to a contest time, having a variety of training partners that have games that you're not well attuned to is really valuable. Like, it's the reason leg locks became so prominent, right? And just went through BJJ so quickly. Is the guys that were competent at leg locky things were playing against people that had no idea what was going on. So they'd be in guard, and all of a sudden they're being heel hooked. So those guys were not well attuned to the performance environment that the other guys were deploying on them. You don't want to be in that position in competition. So if you know that there are general trends, so I'm old enough that I've seen the cycle of things that become popular and then fall out of favor about 4 times now. So the stuff that's in vogue and in fashion now, you know that the guys that are good, that are in the national centres, will be doing a bunch of stuff. We had an over-under pass was really popular a while ago. I think Jimmy Pedro came over and showed people the over-under pass, and they were blown away by it. So everybody was doing it, and you're like, it's really not. It's not that mind-blowingly revolutionary. It's not kissing the dragon. You're just doing it over. Either which way, knowing what the meta is really useful, so you can plan against the meta. And if you know the people that are in that weight category, finding trainer partners that behave in that way is super, super valuable. Yeah, if you are aware that the guy who you would probably meet, that you'd have to beat to get your gold medal, the best guy in the bracket, is really tall and really skinny and likes triangles. I know what I'm going to try and get my trainer partners to do a lot of. So you can become really well attuned to that as a threat.
Mm-hmm. So I'm hearing a lot about like training partners, which I want to talk about, and also it feels like kind of a the classic explore exploit kind of spectrum, right? Where maybe it's like during more general training, explore, and maybe the higher level you get to, maybe, and certainly the closer to competition, the more you're like, all right, let's hunker down and exploit, and like that's the triangle guy. You're gonna get in some triangles in training, and
yeah, and again, I think general tendencies is really useful to be well aware of as well. A meta definitely starts to exist in competition brackets. If the guys are competing against each other frequently, they start to become so aware of each other's games, and that shapes how they then progress because they're trying to solve those problems. If you can break the meta, if you can be the next leg lock guy, you're writing your own checks, aren't you? Just think of the BJJ Fanatics DVDs you can release. Oh, bring in the big bucks.
8 figures, baby.
Oh. I'm not selling for less than 100 million now. Now I've had our Canada example. I'm not selling myself short.
Poor, like it's gonna be like Nicaragua reaches out to you. We've only got 100K,
I don't get out of bed for 100K. Oh dear.
While we're on the subject of training partners, we'll kind of bring this to a close. But on the subject of training partners, I am noticing in a lot of the grappling gyms using ecological dynamics right now, it almost seems like there's a shift towards like you train with the same partner during for the whole training session for like each class. Um, where traditional classes, it's like, okay, you might drill with the same person, but then each round you're with a different person. Um, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Oh, excuse me. Yeah, no, it's not ideal. So you basically end up in a position you get very good at fighting that guy. You're not getting very good at fighting. You're getting very good at fighting that guy. Um, so I'd recommend against it. Uh, it's one of the things we consistently do at my club is we try and change body type. So you've been against the lanky lad, put you against the short king. You've been against some gorilla that can pop a watermelon with their arms. We'll put you against the little skinny armed kid. You're being posed different problems. You have to be able to answer those problems in a variety of different ways. If the only person I fight is the tall, skinny, long kid, the second I come up against someone that has a different game, I'm screwed. Absolutely screwed. I've not learned to pick up on that information because I've not had that information present. You can only solve the problems you've been posed, right? So I think changing partners frequently is really valuable. And again, it's the value of playing people or playing with people from other clubs is really useful. I think one of the metrics I like to try and use for the quality of a club are the level of the median player. So not like the best man on the mat, not the worst guy in the class. Some people are just going to be shit regardless. Like it is just an unhappy part of life that some people aren't going to be good, and some people are going to be incredible regardless of what you do. Is the average guy in the gym pretty good? If the average guy in the gym is pretty good, it's a pretty good metric of the level of the club. And can I tell which club they've come from their game? If I can, it's a thing that I think the club should address. We don't want all of those people to be the same because all of those people have different body types, have different likes and dislikes, have different ways of moving. If it is the case that all those people move the same way, it's usually because the coach has taught their grappling. So my guys are all pressure passes. Well, they're probably not all pressure passes, but they have been put into a position that they are all pressure passes because that's all they've done. So if they have players that all have a wide variety of skill sets that are solving problems in lots of different ways, then you end up in a position that you get variability in your practice tasks in club. If you don't have a wide variety of people and everybody's doing what the coach does, you're stuffed. You're screwed unless you can find other opponents. And even if you only have the guys in your club and they are all variable, you're still only fighting those set people. So I might fight another short guy that can crush walnuts with his hands, but he has a different game to other guys. There's commonality between them, but they are not identical. All people are different people. So visiting clubs or having interclubs or like low-level competition-y things that prepare you for a wide variety of opponents is really valuable as well. Yeah.
100% agree. Um, are there any important questions or important things that you think we should have talked about, that we should talk about before we close, that we might have missed so far?
Oh, that's a good question. You should. Is that always your last question?
It might be going forward, but yeah.
It's a good one. No, I think we've essentially covered the things that the biggest like things that irk me. The transition thing is very much something that I think people need to attend to as not individuals, but as a coaching group as a whole. Yeah, we don't pay enough attention to the mortar that holds the bricks together. Those transitions are so important. And I think we've put the worlds to right, really. If we can't do it in what 3 and 3/4 hours, then it's probably not going to get done.
Well, thanks so much for joining me, Cal.
Oh, it's been so much
Um,
fun.
this has been wonderful. And we're quite excited to have you over at Groundworks whenever you're here in DC. When are you do you know when you're coming to the US?
No, so I was my grand plan is to see if there are people that are interested in me going over that, you know, will pay, so that I can make it like a working holiday. I think my plan is if I can bring my kids over and my partner, then we can tick America off the list, and it'll be a lot cheaper if I'm here, there, and there, and I do a few seminars. So I think that's the plan. But with America's economy, it probably won't be worth going now. Like seeing their market in free fall, $1 worth 1 grain of rice these days.
I haven't looked at the value of the dollar. You're scaring me now. But
Yeah.
I was gonna tell you, I was like, if you don't get over here soon, like, you know, Trump may be charging tariffs for flights, by the time you get over
Oh,
here.
good lord.
just
Yeah. My brother sent me a comparative chart that was looking at, so what was it? The S&P 500 was down 5.2%. And I think that 9/11 caused 4.8. Yeah. So that's the level of bad that it currently is. Yeah. I know. Madness.
Anyway, well, hopefully we'll get a lot of people to listen to this.
Oh, that'd be cool.
And yeah, you guys, you've heard it here. He's looking to do workshops, different places in the U.S. You could have Cal Jones.
100 million. That's all it is.
Gonna have to probably whittle that down, but I'm sure he's reasonable. Yeah, certainly. In DC at Groundworks, we would love to have you. I'm sure we'd get a really good turnout as well.
Awesome.
But probably, yeah, there should be a lot of other places in the US as well. But,
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, smashing. Well, thank you for your time. It's been great fun.
Thank you, Cal. Yeah, absolutely.